This is part of the graph and corruption I get around here.
We're waiting on Rachel real quick here, and then we'll get started. Sorry for running a few minutes late, folks.
When have you ever dealt with anybody with the PPC, the main guy, John Wallace? You know John Wallace? So anyway, years ago, so we're gonna get done quick.
Okay.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Amy, do you want to start the recording?
Yes, everything is on.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We are reporting out of closed session with nothing to report. However, I would mention to folks in the audience and joining us online that we will be reconvening the closed session following our normal agenda items. With that, Amy, would you please call roll?
Sure. Councilmember Berlant.
I'm here.
Amara.
Present.
Dowden Calvillo. Riddell Harris. Here. And Mayor Smokley.
Here. Everybody would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda approval. This is a time set aside for the council members and or the public to ask for removal, postponement, or a change to the listed sequence of the agenda items. The agenda will be approved by consensus of the council. Councilmember Lant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move item 7 below current item 9. So we would do items 8, 9, and then 7 in that order.
I'll second that.
All righty, is everybody in favor of that change? Is there anybody in the public who wants to speak to the listed sequence of our agenda this evening? All right, seeing none, we will make those changes and move on. Next is our consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussions on these items unless persons request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. Council, do we have any items that any of you would like pulled?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item number 3.
Seeing no others, any members of the public have any of our consent calendar items that they'd like to see removed from the consent calendar? All right, hearing none, I'll bring it back to the council for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would, go ahead,
I would move approval of the consent calendar as amended.
and I'll second it.
All right, that's removing item number 3. Amy, would you please call roll?
Councilmember Berlant.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Smokley.
Yes. All right, consent calendar is approved. Annual bicycle and pedestrian funds claim for fiscal year 2020, 2021.
Yes, Mr.
Councilwoman.
Mayor, I just had a really quick question. Under background, we talked about that the city's opted not to claim bicycle and pedestrian funds over the past several years because of the low dollar amount. And I just wanted staff to speak to that. And I mean, I wonder why we wouldn't claim any funds. Is it because we have to spend them within a certain way or leverage or what have you? But if Menjel, if you could just explain that. And why is it more this year?
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Metro Dean Public Works Manager, City here of Auburn. So there's a certain amount of reporting associated with the bicycle pedestrian funds that are associated with the LTF. And generally, it's about $15,000 to $16,000, which is not really enough money to put forward a full-fledged project. So as you noted, in the winter, we put together the ADA curb ramp project, which was a full project with enough funding, I should say with enough monies behind it to actually substantiate us getting these funds from PCTPA. We could claim it every year, but we would be putting together one curb ramp throughout the city somewhere, and it wouldn't necessarily make it worth the council's time to actually bring that forward every time. Because every time we spend these funds, we do have to allocate them in a certain way. I'll let council know exactly where they're going to be. where it's gonna
And
be
there's
funded.
no way to roll the money over? I mean, you have to spend it in that fiscal year?
So we do roll it over in a sense. So with it being only about $13,000 to $15,000 that we receive for this particular type of project annually, the money's kept in a bank at PCTPA, Plaza County Transportation Planning Agency. And then once it gets to this level, then we claim it.
I see. So we're not losing out on that
No,
money. That
absolutely
was
not.
the concern that I had, is that we were not collecting free money. And I mean, $1,000 is.
No,
worth it to
absolutely,
me. So,
absolutely. So we don't lose out
Okay.
on any funding at all. It's just they keep it there until it builds
Okay,
up enough
until
for
it
us to
builds
actually
up and then we
sustain.
claim. Okay,
Right.
thank you very much for the clarification. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
My pleasure.
I have a question.
Oh.
Yes, and you specifically say that it'll be used for the curb ramp project. So would that include striping for bike lanes or some sort of opportunity for bicycles,
So these,
safe bicycling?
oh, sorry. So these funds could be put towards any bicycle or pedestrian project. This year we did elect, so the project that these funds are funding has already happened. It's the winter ADA curb ramp project that was brought before council a few months back. So these funds are just going to help, cover the cost of that project. But in the future,
The answer is
yes.
no.
Yeah, not necessarily, because in the future, these funds can be used for that type of bike lane project. It's any bicycle pedestrian project that's the city has. These funds could be used
Okay,
for that.
that's my hope that in the future we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council? All right, Menjo, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Does any members of the public have any questions on this item? Amy, I apologize. I didn't check with you last time. Any public comment on this item?
There's not.
All righty. With that, I'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the council for a motion.
I'll move, we approve item number 3.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Amy, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bernard.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Riddell Harris. Aye. Mayor Spokley.
Yes. Moving right along. Next up is public comment. This is the time provided so that the public may speak to the council on items not on this agenda. Please make your comments as brief as possible. The council cannot act on items not included on the agenda. However, these items will be referred to staff for future consideration. Do we have? Oh, council members may also have the option to speak on any items not on this agenda at this time. Councilmember Lant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to repeat the announcement that I made at the last meeting about Auburn Community Service Day, which is next Saturday, here right behind the City Hall at the Auburn School Park Preserve. The Auburn Arts Commission and a number of other volunteers will be pushing the 7th annual Community Service Day. I hope to see all of you there. There are a number of different projects, including fuel reduction clearance that the fire department is managing, trash pickup along Auburn Folsom Road that I know our city manager will be out there in a bright orange safety vest, helping to facilitate that. And then a number of beautification and cleanup projects, both in the school park preserve behind us, as well as the community pollination garden that also is behind City Hall. So if you would like more information, you can go to either my Facebook or the Auburn Arts Commission Facebook, or maybe the city will share it on their Facebook if they haven't already. And the sign up is located there again, October 2nd, which is next Saturday, 7:30 a.m. here at the School Park Preserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other council members?
I do.
Councilwoman Amara?
Yes, thank you very much. I've been getting a little bit of input from various individuals regarding the construction going on at the high school. The cafeteria at the high school is now going up, and you can see that the whole model. I encourage everyone to take a look at it. It really doesn't seem to match the high school and the design and the historic nature of the school. I guess the school district, the high school district is outside the jurisdiction of the city, so we don't really have a say. But I think it is an important part of our community, and it probably is good for everybody to go around, take a look at it, give your input, see if you like it, see if you, it may not be too late for them to make some modifications to bring it up to historic design. Anyway, that's just a piece of information that I think the city might be interested in.
Thank you very much. Any other council members?
I'll just do a quick comment. Just to let everyone know, October 6th is walk to school day for all the elementary school kids. So from at about 7:30 in the morning, they'll all be walking with first responders and others from the community from a location near their school up to their school. So be extra careful on that morning. There's going to be a lot of kids walking around and walking to school that morning. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Any members of the public like to speak on items to the council that aren't on the agenda? Let's start with Sally, and then the two of you can come up as soon as Sally's finished. One at a time, obviously.
Well, I'm Sally Palmer Dolly, the butt lady of Auburn. I'm trying to keep Auburn beautiful, but I can't believe, as a plumber's daughter, how the smokers and other people don't give a crap that they're throwing all this stuff around. Anyway, I am now 2,097,017. So
Wow.
that won't be eaten by birds, dogs, fish, other animals. So
Sally, as always, thank you very much for your community project. We all greatly appreciate it.
you're welcome. Well, just before coming here, I did a little walking around town and I got 322. And
I just can't believe that there are that many cigarette butts. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
I know, well, I keep track on a daily basis on how many I picked up on what date. And I've had 10 days where I have picked up over 3,000 butts
Wow.
in Auburn. And one of those days was 3,945.
A lot of unhealthy people out there.
Huh?
A lot of unhealthy people out there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm thinking of the ST word.
Thank you, Sally. So please come forward. And if you would be so kind to state your name, address if you wish. Yes, sir.
Council members, my name is Bud Reachins. I reside over on Gold Street. And actually what I'm here to comment on was something that was on your agenda your last agenda. And I realize this is just public comment and nothing can be done. But I feel like I need to put my input in. And that is about the one-way on Lincoln Way. Now, the first time I heard about this was I saw it in the Auburn Journal. And I looked at it and I rolled my eyes up and I said, oh God, here we go again. You got to realize I've lived in Auburn since 1952, so I have a certain history behind me. And the city council or the city, and I'm going to say 63, 64, made Lincoln Way, decided they were going to do the same thing you guys are going to do, but they went enlarge it. I suspect it was at the request of the business owners on Lincoln Way. But they were going to make it one way. I forget which, let's just say it was started at Cherry Avenue and it ended at what is now the clock tower, which wasn't there at the time. But, it was one way downhill. That didn't work. So they decided, well, so they restriped everything. Well, let's make it one way uphill. And that didn't work. And so then they reverted it back to the way it has been for the last 50 years. And I suspect one of the reasons that, and I have no proof, that they reverted back is that the people, the citizens of Auburn, did not like how it disrupted their flow through the city of Auburn. And I know this, even this is only 400 feet long and you're trying to divert thing on, what's the street between Mickey's Boots and that's a narrow little street. And I looked on your website last time for your last meeting, and they were talking about having to go over, people driving over the yellow line and this and that, and trucks sticking out. Well, I used to own a 62 Pontiac. You only see them anymore at cruise night. And it was one long vehicle. And I used to park on Lincoln Way, and all the other cars were very long too. And people were just courteous. If they couldn't get around, they'd wait, let the next car in, and then they'd go. I think what you really need to do is not rush into this. I'm not going to say, go for it, or I'm not going to say I'm for it or I'm against it. That's going to be your call. But I think you're going to really need to get more input from the people of the city. And I don't know how you do it, because I know you put in public notice, but nobody reads public notice. I'm aware of it, but I don't do it. But I think it's going to really impact the city. And I was telling my wife, I says, if you look at the streets of Auburn as a stream with various channels, and one of the main channels you take and you put a rock in it, the water gets diverted in, every other stream somehow. So it disrupts. But I just came down Agard Street, I was watching the thing, that, people have to go over the yellow line. I came down Agard Street. I had to go over the yellow line. I even saw two cars pass in a big pickup, and the pickup was over the yellow. It's no big deal. This is Auburn. The streets are narrow. It was, for Model Ts and buggies. But again, one other suggestion, and I'll get away from you. I'll leave you alone. Is I think if you want to carry through to it, you should get a study from a traffic engineer. And I'm going to say this, unbiased. You don't give him the opinion you're looking for. It's like, don't, like many people shop for attorneys. I like this guy because I like his opinion. See what the result is going to be for the other streets. Sally mentioned about Magnolia because she lived there. I used to live on Linden. It's really going to disrupt the community. It may be nice for the restaurants, but I don't think it's going to be nice for the citizens of Auburn. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for
Okay.
your comments, sir. Appreciate it.
Just to add, we did have a traffic study that was conducted for the purposes of this. So we do appreciate your suggestion, and we thought that would be smart to do as well. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Mr. Schneider.
Good evening. My name is Bob Snyder, and I live in the city. I'm commenting about a Los Angeles Times article I saw recently that surprised me in ways, but I wanted to bring it to your attention so that you could use whatever leverage we have with the state parks. The article was about the proposed camping in the state parks. And I'm just going to read you two quotes from it, because when I first read the first quote, I couldn't figure out what kind of logic they were using. But basically, they're looking at about a 30% growth they project by the year 2040. Not surprising. The quote is, this is from a parks representative justifying the camping. With the projected growth, if no improvements are made within the park unit, risk of wildfire and impacts to evacuation routes would be higher than if improvements from the general plan were implemented, State Park said in a statement to the Times on Friday. In other words, if we don't do this, the risk of wildfire is higher than camping. Reading further down, they justify this by saying, when visitation occurs in an unmanaged fashion away from appropriately designed facilities, visitors are more likely to engage in risky or unauthorized behavior, such as creating illegal campfires or using fireworks, the proposed plan says. I just want to know, if you leave out the camping, does the risk go up or down? To me, it has to go down. They rationalize that it has to go up because improvements were not made. There's a state parks meeting this Thursday and Friday. It's online, and I hope someone from the city would make a presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
And Bob, I just wanted to respond to you that we actually have this item on our agenda, and it's item number 12. And I'll be giving a report on this and some action that some council members have already taken with regard to this very important issue. So hopefully you'll be able to stick around until item number 12, and we're going to talk about that.
I came for item number 12. I didn't think it related exactly to this. It does.
It
Excuse me.
does. Yep, I
All
saw
had
the
to do was
same,
read.
I saw that same
Why
article.
didn't you stop me? Say, wait. a
Yeah,
minute, that's
I
item
didn't want to, stifle your democratic right to provide public comment, but please stick around because we're gonna
I-
chat about
thank you.
that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening, sir.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Jack Farless. I'm a chair of the Grand Oaks Firewise Committee. And the last time we addressed your council was in October 2019, shortly after we became a Firewise community. At that time, we requested the city to engage with the Union Pacific Railroad to maintain the right of way and create a 100-foot wide defensible space behind our approximately 1,745 foot boundary with the Union Pacific Railroad. Chief Spencer was successful in getting the attention and cooperation of the Union Pacific and start work behind Grand Oaks. The contractor first showed up the last week of December 2019. Contractor was not well informed of the terrain, did not have proper equipment to do the work, and was always short crew members every time they arrived. They worked over 3 weeks off and on throughout 2020 and finished about 780 feet behind 7 of our homes with in the whole 1,745 foot area. They were not very efficient, and the work accomplished would have taken a qualified contractor no more than about 4 days to accomplish. The contractor last showed up on 27 January 2021, worked 1 day, left due to rain, or I think our last rain, as it turned out.
Probably was.
And didn't appear again. Now I'm really happy to see that we have a local contractor that is a contractor with the Union Pacific Railroad Company, and with work possibly starting today.
Yep.
They brought equipment in, but they didn't start, but that's good. That's a good start. And they're working on Auburn Folsom Road near the Placer District Water Facility and working back toward Grand Oaks, hopefully.
Mhm.
This contractor, we're hoping this contractor will be able to initiate and complete the required fuel level reduction along the Union Pacific right of way and complete the fuel reduction behind Grand Oaks sometime this year. We appreciate the work that Tony D'Ambrosio has been doing to make this happen. He's been really very, very helpful and he communicates well with us. Really like that. And we've been very active in providing Firewise educational material to our homeowners in the form of emails, our Facebook page, and quarterly newsletters through our homeowner association. Have stressed the CAL FIRE and NEPA requirements on home hardening, recommending measures in the 0 to 5 foot and 5 foot to 30 foot zones, evacuation procedures and plans, fire resistant landscape planning, and the like. Clean roofs, gutters, and things like that. We estimate that 30 to 40% of our homeowners have taken our advice and have taken corrective actions to make their homes safer from a potential wildfire. Some homes were probably already in compliance because they didn't have that much landscaping around their homes. But there is a portion of our homeowners that have elected to do nothing since the Firewise program is strictly voluntary. It's not mandated that they do anything. This is where the city needs to step in with a fire code enforcement program. I'm sure our community is not unique in the city of Auburn. We'd like to see the city develop wildfire safety guidelines in step with CAL FIRE and have an active code enforcement program. Having uniformed fire personnel knock on a door announcing a fire compliance inspection would get much fuller compliance on a citywide basis, at least in our opinion. And I thank you for your time. Have any questions?
I think we're good. Thank you very much, sir.
And Jack, I just wanted to thank you very much. I know you've taken such a strong leadership role in this endeavor. I've had the opportunity to tour the area, and your perseverance and advocacy has been really important. So thank you very much. And I've committed to seeing this through now with UP as well. Tony and I have been working on this, and I feel really good about where we are now, especially since we have that local contractor. So very excited. Baby steps, but we're getting there. So thank you for your continued efforts as well.
Well, hopefully when they finish with their initial work, we can get on with the maintenance, because the work they've already done is already started to grow
Yes.
back.
And I've been having those conversations with them.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment?
Mayor Stokely, I have one received by email that I can share via Zoom and on the projector. If nobody else has a public comment.
I don't see any, so yeah, please, if you would, Amy.
Page 2 of the statement. And that completes public comment.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and move on to council business. As we discussed earlier, we are sliding item number 8 to the top of the list. So community risk reduction, staffing and programs. Chief Spencer, good to see you tonight, sir.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, fellow council members. For the record, Dave Spencer, your fire chief. The item before you tonight is essentially a continuation of our discussion from our last council meeting. I brought before you the update on their strategic plan, and the discussion and outfall of that was trying to stand up a program that would allow us to complete those objectives in a more timely and efficient manner. And that starts our discussion for tonight. And Amy, if you might. So remember that our strategic plan, essentially a comprehensive look at Auburn's wildfire crisis and trying to address our issues from a holistic and programmatic approach to create reduction. And next slide. Remember that in our strategic plan, we use the best practices of the 5 E's, that education, enforcement, engineering, economic incentives, and emergency response. And I'll continue to remind you that as long as I'm your fire chief. So with that, when we look at our structure of our fire department, this is our organizational chart. The 3 battalion chiefs are what we have existing. And fortunately, this council has been supportive of the fire department, and we've been able to stand up a second station. The purpose of that was to use our line staff as value-added resources that not only could we increase our level of protection, an example would be increased staffing on red flag days, that kind of a thing, but also to continue to execute this programmatic work. So with that, if we'll go to the next slide. So as we look at this from a much broader perspective, I will share with you that throughout the state, almost every fire department in the state has a community risk reduction program. In years past, it's been known as fire prevention. The current terminology is community risk reduction. And so when you look to the left of this programmatic chart, you'll see each of the 3 there on the left are assigned to the battalion chiefs. There's an administrative assignment and an operations assignment and a training assignment, which is the minimums of what we need to keep our staff trained and qualified to continue to do their basic core mission. But with that, the addition of the core mission is also about risk reduction efforts or fire prevention efforts. So when we take a look at the broader scope of this risk reduction, you look across and you see fire code compliance, program management, education, and vegetation management. So Amy, if we could click to the next slide. If we take a deeper dive, if you look at this, you can see how all of these things are in play and identified in our strategic plan. And what happens currently is as our battalion chiefs come on duty, they're on shift for a 48-hour schedule, and then they go home and the next battalion chief comes in. I don't have any traditional 40-hour work week staff members that is common in a fire prevention or risk reduction program. And so as a result, what happens is we trade back and forth to keep things moving. It's not very efficient, and sometimes things get slowed down because of that constant change in injects and oversight. The great example would be our challenges with UP, as we've been struggling with that for over a year to try to get that in play. So each of these elements under the community risk reduction are all significant programs within themselves. I'll use the example of just code enforcement. As we talk about the strategic plan and that coming forward with our stakeholders in the community, one of the things that was very clear to me was that we needed to be more proactive in our code enforcement. And I think you've heard some public comment about that tonight. Well, currently, we remain in more of a reactionary or complaint-driven process simply because of time on task and the number of hours in the day to be able to complete these types of projects and programs. So it's really a challenge for us. The other example that I would use is, as you know, it's a tremendous amount of discussion throughout our community is the chipping program. We look at some of the challenges that the county has with their chipping program. And in my mind, coming from a larger agency that had those types of programs in place, I'm very familiar with the oversight that it takes to make it effective and efficient. And so those are examples that I use about this programmatic approach. When we look at the vegetation management, for example, the city manager and I continue to have conversation about the role of public works and where that fits. The example would be just our right-of-ways, and we talk about very common incidents that occur for us. And several times you've received significant incident reports from me about roadside starts that continue to run in throughout the grasses and move into areas that become high risk for us. And so fortunately, we haven't had any significant property loss at this point. But I will remind you that it wasn't but a few weeks ago, the bridge fire that happened to be on the other side of the river. And fortunately, it was on that side and not on our side. So these are all things that I think we need to take a real serious look at with regard to trying to tackle these, because remember that in the strategic plan, we refer to it as a holistic approach. There's no one specific answer. We certainly need our firefighters and we need them to continue to do all of their core mission. But on top of that, to be efficient and effective as we move forward protecting the city, this is the type of focus and real commitment that we need to really engage and discuss. And we need your help as policymakers to help us land on what those decisions are. Next slide. So when we talk about a program like this and a programmatic approach, we put it into three categories. Obviously, the priorities, we're going to evaluate, and then we're going to message out. So in this process, we need to use data to help us make those good decisions. Prior to my arrival, I couldn't find a lot of statistical or data-driven information about our fuel reduction. So we started collecting that data in 2018, 2019, and are starting to build that track record of what we've been effective with. The point of that is to say that as we continue to see those efforts in place, then we can measure their effectiveness, and that's really important. In addition, being able to speak to our community through our service clubs, town hall meetings, community meetings, city council meetings about what our real issues are, because we will continue to see resistance, as you heard earlier tonight in public comment, about those folks that are even in a Firewise community and choose not to do anything. And I think it is not for a lack of communication effort on the Firewise leadership. It is merely just a failure to understand the seriousness of which we're in. Next slide. So when we talk about identifying resources, obviously we have our fire department folks. One of the things about value-added fire department staff is that we can use them and spin them up when we need to. And you've seen that over the last couple of years as we've, whether it's about increased staffing, whether it's about fuel reduction, whether it's about our WUI inspections that we've been engaging in, all of these things that are assets to us and we can use as we need. We continue to need code enforcement, and I think Chief Canan can speak more to that with regard to the amount of time that we allow for code enforcement. It is a very time on task or increase in staff hours to complete that process. And so it's really a challenge for us to kind of get through that process. We have our public works assets, and then we have our allied partners. That includes RCD, CAL FIRE, PG&E, and so on. What's important about that is when we talk about, and I'll spin back to the chipper program because it's such a point of discussion, and that is going back to our RCD partners and engaging in them to say, listen, we can partner with you. We can provide oversight for within the city boundaries. Take that off of your plate. What we need from you is we need your chipper. And then we need to be able to contribute money toward staffing that model. And I think it would be a very effective process. And those are discussions that we need to engage in to see if we can't move the ball forward in these types of things. Next slide. Now, again, implementation, as I indicated earlier, it needs to be data-driven. We need to have very focused targets for what we're trying to accomplish, maximize our allied partners, as I discussed, and continue to use the workforce multipliers such as city staff. That's really key for me, and I think you see that throughout the state in many fire departments and how they spin up these types of programs. When we talk about the implementation for this particular program, I think it's important to consider a phased approach. Just like our firefighters and increase in staffing, it really is a proof of concept. It really is demonstrating not only to the council, but also to our community that when we put these things in place, there are measurables and deliverables that are significant that actually do what we're talking about. And so when you look at this, In this model, we would stand up a program manager, community risk reduction program manager that would have the oversight of code compliance, education, and then build into program management, both abatement, grant programs, land management. What I will share with you is in one of these examples, quietly behind the scenes, my staff and I have been working on grants for this very program for 2019 and 2020. Unfortunately, we haven't been successful in achieving that FEMA grant. It's a mixed bag. FEMA grants are only for 3 years, as you know, but I'll continue to look for opportunities to try to fill the gap for funding sources to try to get these programs implemented because they're that important. Next slide. Phase 2 would include a community risk reduction technician. This is somebody who would be the Firewise liaison, dealing directly with those folks, assist with that abatement enforcement, program management for the CHIPPR program. Bear in mind that as time progresses, our legislator continues to pass laws in response to these devastating wildfires. AB 38 is no different, is just another example. This happens in a real estate transaction and is now mandated that when a home goes through escrow, we're required to go out and do a defensible space inspection. The problem is that just because they passed legislation didn't provide any resources to do so. We're in a position to be able to do that now. Our people are trained, but again, it comes back to how much time in the day that we have to be able to execute to that or versus dedicated staff. I will tell you that we've done some research. It appears to us as though we're doing approximately 100 or a little bit more than 100 real estate transactions over the course of a year. When we talk about something like that, there is a fee that is associated with those types of inspections. And so this is an opportunity for us to recover some revenue in these types of events. Next slide. Now, limitations, and I make no bones about it. We are struggling to look for sustainable funding into the long term. The problem with this program is that it doesn't go away. This goes on into perpetuity, and we will always be dealing with this as long as we are a city. And it is really imperative to have honest and transparent conversation about that. The next challenge that certainly I see is time. It takes time to stand up these programs and demonstrate their success. There is a tremendous amount of push to try to get everything done today. And I certainly appreciate that. But at the end of the day, you still have to have the infrastructure. And when I talk about infrastructure, we're talking about people and being able to have a good plan and a rollout plan so that we don't misstep in that process. Because when we make a promise to our community, we want to make sure that that promise is upheld and that we do it correctly. I will share with you that over the course of the last several years, we've engaged in what I would describe as a resistive culture. Again, I would point back to some of the comments that we heard in comment period about folks that just don't seem to understand how important this is. And I will tell you, when we talk about things like home hardening and landscape, resistive landscape, those are things that actually cost the homeowner. Some of those things can be relatively expensive. And so I can appreciate the idea that, you know, there is resistance to that. I would simply say that it is important that we at least continue forward and make steps. Even if they're small steps, we still need to make steps. I'm passionate about protecting this community. I believe in what we're doing. I think there is a path to get there. But as you can see, we have some significant limitations. The budget was stood up by our new finance director, administrative services director. We came up with some personnel costs, operating costs, and then the impact. When we talk about this in a phased approach, we started with just a mid-year bringing in the oversight position, the community risk reduction program manager. And then folding that into the second year, and then the third year adding in the community risk reduction technician. So that's what it looks like. There is significant costs associated with operating expenses. I'll use an example. One of the things that we put in the budget is that if we're not successful with RCD as an allied partner, for example, we need to purchase a chipper, those kind of things, right? And so it's important to understand that these are rough estimates about what we're trying to do with this program. Now, again, I want to just briefly mention that most community risk reduction programs throughout the state have revenue that comes back into the program from inspections, from the programs that we do, and that's the normal operating process. And so we need to re-engage in that. And it's much like our contractors that come in and do work for approvals and plans and those kinds of things. It's the same concept. With that, if we'll go to the next slide. Now, I'd like to just take a moment and pause and kind of reflect back on our journey. We started this back in 2019. And if I were a council member, I would ask, well, if this strategic plan is in play, but we haven't seen a tremendous amount of results, is it really current? Is it really relevant? Is it best practices? So I did a little bit of research, came across Outthink Wildfire. This is an initiative that was brought forth on the next slide for the National Fire Protection Agency. This is a national effort, and this is, again, in response to the significant destruction that is occurring, not just within our state, within Oregon, within Nevada, within Colorado. And so NFPA was left with having to try to answer this question along with the rest of our legislative bodies. Now, I'll point out to you that this came about in March of this year, and really was a comprehensive and strategic approach to try to decrease the destruction that's happening in our community. That program rests on these 5 tenets to be adopted. And that is require that businesses and homes become ignition resistant, or otherwise known as home hardening. Ensure that your codes and standards are best practices and they're enforced. Your fire department has the ability to respond safely. Your government increases resources for effective fuel management. And then finally, the public understands their role in reducing the wildfire risk. So those are the 5 tenets that come out of NFPA. So I'll just say in the next slide, that if you look back at our strategic plan from 2019, lo and behold, here we are discussing the same items. We have our structure ignition program that we've identified and is in place. We have our wildfire urban interface inspection program. We're increasing our staffing thanks to this council. We increased our fuel reduction over the last 3 years. And certainly we're messaging out to our community about their responsibility. What that tells me is that we're spot on where we need to be. We started this in 2019, and here we see at the national level them coming forward with the very same concepts and ideas. And I found it very comforting that we are right in line with the actions that are important for this particular issue and risk that we have within our community. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Chief. I'll turn to my fellow council members who would like to start. Vice Mayor Morrow.
Thank you, Chief Spencer. I appreciate your thoughtful presentation here. And I know you're confined to a certain amount of time. We have a lot on our agenda, and I appreciate it. I just have a couple of questions. I'll just go right to the bridge fire. You talked about that, and I do find that's probably one of our most important issues here in Auburn, and the canyon. I guess we've just started. We're writing a letter now, no camping, and that was brought forward. I appreciate that. I'm not sure if it'll be a part of, I'm sure, the risk reduction plan, but right now, what are we doing in terms of risk management? I'd like to know where we are. I see where we want to go, and I don't disagree with that at all. But have we done everything we can in terms of even what are you asking of the city council to do? What can we do? Are there more regulations that we can do? Can we put more energy into keeping cars out of the canyon on weekends. That becomes a very, very big area for a lot of cars and opportunities for fires. So I haven't seen that. Maybe you can just enlighten us in terms of where we have been, what we can do, and I kind of see where we're going, or how is that different? I just would like to know the genesis and where the direction.
Certainly. Thank you for the question. When you talk about where we've been, looking at statistical information that was available to me, I took a period of essentially 10 years from 2008 to 2017. In that, we looked at what grants were applied for, what work we did within the city, and what was the total number of acres treated, because that is specific to the fuel load. Now, when we have this discussion, let me pause just for a moment and say, there's no one single answer. This is a complex, multifaceted issue, and we need to be doing it all. Now, granted, we can't do it all in one fell swoop. It's going to take time and effort and consistent energy. So that being said, as my clarifying point, when you look at from 2008 to 2017, we were effective at clearing 6.5 acres of fuel within the city limits. From 2018-19 through 2019-20, we cleared 48 acres. So we did a significant improvement with that. That does not include the Auburn Shaded Fuel Break grant work that's been done with our RCD partners and with CAL FIRE. That's one element. In addition, we've been able to stand up the Middle Fork grant projects that you've seen come before you. Most recently, we've been shifting to, and I'm pleased to report that we're doing, instead of masticating and really working hard with mechanical equipment, we've been able to get it to a place where we're in a maintenance mode using goats, which is a significant improvement as to where we've been. And so that is something that's cost effective, environmentally friendly. And certainly as we get forward in this, you will see more and more transition to that type of effort because it gives us more bang for the buck, so to speak. That being said, with regard to code enforcement, which is another example, when we talk about that complaint-driven process, which is how it was for as long as I know, we tried to come up with a proactive process, trying to do wildland urban interface inspections in our high fire danger area and trying to get compliance. I'll tell you that we had a fair amount of compliance with that. But what's important about that is when you talk about that particular season, it ranges from May to September roughly. And then what happens is we get into the rainy season. Well, as a fire chief trying to say, well, this is a threat when it's raining, I really can't justify it. And that's my challenge, right? Is I have to wait enough for the rain to stop, but just enough to get it dry enough to say it's a problem. So this is the balancing act that I find myself in. So that puts us in that May to September range. Over the last 3 years, we've had about 260 cases that we've dealt with. When you talk about staff hours associated with that, it's well over 300 plus hours of staff time trying to work through that process and trying to gain compliance. I will tell you that complaint-driven processes are really roughly 3 times more staff hours of trying to deal with those types of problems than it is in a proactive measure. So what that looks like is, and let me just give you an example, kind of in the weeds, no pun intended, the idea that we receive a complaint, we find an address. At that point, we have to track down who the property owner is. And as you know, in our city, there are many property owners that aren't even in this state. So that adds to the complexity. With that, we finally get through the process and get some kind of compliance one way or another, versus having a community risk reduction technician that can drive around sections of the city, identify the problems, write the letter to the homeowner, and then follow up is a much more effective way to address that. And that's where we want to go. So where we're at now is we're more reactive, essentially, with the exception of our wildland urban interface inspections. But we need to move to a more proactive approach. And that's yet another example. And so all of these things that we talked about are really examples. And so to answer your final question, what am I asking of you? I'm asking of you to be aware. This is what my challenge is as your fire chief. I have to deal with all of these issues. We're dealing with them, but we're dealing with them at a relatively slow pace. I've heard a lot of discussion, a lot of direction to say this is our number one priority and we need to move forward with this. So it's my obligation as your fire chief to come forward with an answer. And these are the types of answers that I'm coming forward with. Again, what I will assure you is that in my mind, it is about a proof of concept delivery where we put together the program, somehow try to figure out how to fund it, and over time be able to demonstrate how we're able to generate revenue to offset costs. I'm not saying by any means that we can ever offset the total cost of this particular program, but I can say that we can take a pretty good chunk of personnel costs as we get the program developed. And it's much like what we did with our firefighters and using them as a resource for other agencies. So very similar. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it's important for all of us to see that we're very proactive currently. And as you said, now it's complaint driven. We need to be proactive. And I do appreciate that hopefully we can, if we have someone who can be on this full time, can work with the other agencies, and we can eliminate potential for fire by having fewer cars in the canyon during peak season and so on and so forth. There's many things we can do that affect us from outside the city that will harm us, but we have to, and also working with the police, and I think we're going to have a homeless task force. I think that's important too. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. One other question on the cost, as far as the operating cost. I don't know that you went into that. You said, I understand the personnel. The third year, there's a technician, and that's why the bump. Operating cost, is that, what types of cost would that be?
So, and I was hoping that our administrative services director would be able to dig into the details of that. Unfortunately, he's not here today. So what I will tell you is that we did allocate obviously a fair amount of chunk of money to be able to have the equipment and resources that we needed to administer these programs. And I would put it in that larger category. And the example I use would be a chipper, for example, or whether we need to increase some of the capabilities of our public works staff, you know, that dump truck, that kind of a thing. And so those are all the operating costs that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you very much.
Equipment is expensive.
Yes, it is.
Councilman Berlant.
Sorry, Mayor Spokely, real quick. I just want to let you know that I did move our Administrative Services Director, Nathan Bagwell, into the Zoom meeting. He is available.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for the presentation and more in depth on this plan. And you know, I can see how it connects to the strategic plan. I do have a few questions. I want to start off with, at the last meeting, I kind of ended my comments with 3 things that I wanted to hear back from the city. And I'd like to get an update on those. So the first one was recruitment and retention of our firefighters. Can you give us an update on where we are there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. So recruitment process, it's important to stand it up and give the candidates an opportunity to respond to it. So generally speaking, best practices allow at least 30 days for the applicants to be able to put in their applications. This Wednesday, we'll be having our fire captain's recruitment, or our fire captain's interview process. It appears as though we have some very well qualified folks that we're looking forward to interviewing. If I spin back to last week, we finished up our firefighter interviews and we made job offers for open positions and expected open positions. And so they are in the process of finishing up their required onboarding process. And as soon as they get that done, we will put them in play and have a full line staff of firefighters. And then the last recruitment, it will be for the engineer's position. That will be closing here, I believe, the first week of October. Same process. We will put them through their paces where they have to actually demonstrate their skill sets and go through an interview process. Now, at this point, at this moment in time, we don't have an actual open position. So we'll flex our personnel a little bit, but one open position certainly is not anything like what we've experienced over the last 6 to 8 months.
So on retention, where are you, and at least where you feel we are going to be over this next year as far as retaining those firefighters that we have? Because, just note, you brought up captain, losing 2 captains in a year, skilled, experienced, decade plus, maybe 2 decade plus employees, big loss. So what are we doing to retain those current firefighters?
Yeah, as a fire chief, I'll tell you that over the course of my career, I've seen the ebb and flow of attrition for various reasons. I think it's probably not wise to make assumptions about why somebody leaves the organization. I think unless you have a really structured outtake interview, and even that, I don't know that you necessarily get all of the information that you need. So that being said, what I will tell you is that my job as the fire chief is to provide an environment where they are valued, they're well trained, and they make a difference to the community, because this is a job that is about contentment and fulfillment, and it has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with the area particularly that you work in. It is truly about commitment and fulfillment, and that's the environment that we try to create. So now it is common to hear a discussion about equity in pay and benefits and all those kind of things. And I don't want to minimize that by any means, because we all have to take care of our family. And sometimes that's just the decision that you have to make. But the reality is that just because you make more money doesn't mean you become fulfilled. And I will tell you that in this business, as public safety, that's why those people chose to be in this path. Because a lot of them had the opportunity to go and make a lot more money doing something else, and they chose this path. And so I have to trust that that is really the focus that we need to stay within. And when I talk about well-trained, we literally build into our people. We've developed a full training path for each one of the ranks and made it individual to each person that works within our department. That doesn't happen in other areas, in other agencies. We're able to do that because we're relatively smaller. And so we can give it that kind of attention and commitment to our individuals. Now, with regard to other issues, we look for, again, value added for them opportunities. I'll use 2 of our employees. When I got here, we didn't have what's known as qualified fire investigators. That is a very specialized skill. It comes with a lot of training. And we were able to identify 2 of our employees that wanted to go down that track. One of them is complete and the other one is nearly finished. And so all of that is what builds that environment where they have a sense of belonging, they have a sense of fulfillment and contentment for what they're doing, and they get to do some really neat things.
I appreciate that, and appreciate following up on how we do with the current recruitment and retaining them. And I like the goal of fulfillment. Fulfillment doesn't pay the bills, though. That doesn't pay for groceries. That doesn't pay for a mortgage. So ensuring that we have fair compensation has got to be part of it. The second piece that I made at the last meeting was about airport operations. Do you have an update for us on where the fire department is related to managing components of the airport?
Yeah, so at the direction of the city manager, we have offloaded the airport responsibilities to various staff members throughout the city. So not to say that we aren't available for that transition, because there is a lot of moving parts. And so we continue to answer questions and provide support from a legacy position of being able to educate and inform and provide direction for folks to be successful as they endeavor into that unique community.
Thank you. I'll save my comments on that till later. And then the third thing was the funding plan, which I think we'll get into at the next item. So I'll just leave that alone. A couple additional questions. Councilwoman Amar brought up the budget. Can you break down a little bit further? What are the assumptions that includes? You know, she asked about the operating costs. I heard the comment made on the dais about equipment, but is that equipment? Is that for actual contracting of services? What is in the assumptions for the operating costs?
And the short answer is yes, contracting services wherever we can, right? That's always a win for us. Equipment is always going to be on the table, but I want to loop in our Administrative Services Director, Nathan Bagwell, and let him just speak to that briefly.
Good evening, Councilmember Berlant and members of the council. This is Nathan Bagwell. I serve as your Director of Administrative Services for the record. And thank you for the question and the opportunity to elaborate. Just kind of at a high level, some of the assumptions that went into this are what you see of the total budget for the operating expenses. We really we picked a pretty broad number for the CHIPPR program, about 200,000 of that. Roughly 200,000+ on an annual basis is a placeholder for that CHIPPR program. And as Chief Spencer eloquently put it, there are options that we will explore that could potentially reduce that. However, when we come forward with proposals like this, you know, these are rough estimates, and we want to make sure that we're encompassing as much as we can without necessarily, you know, leave a little capacity for some of the unknowns that might occur between then and now. In addition to that, you know, some of the smaller items, you know, some startup costs, marketing, you know, things of that nature, vehicles. But that's the CHIPPR program really is the bulk of what you see there for the operating cost assumptions.
Great, thank you for that. And I guess that may answer the next piece of my question related to the operating costs. We are receiving, as you mentioned, Chief, Middle Fork project grant dollars. I'm assuming that is not included in the assumptions of this budget. Those are completely separate.
That is correct.
So everything we see here in this proposal that I know we'll have to come back, well, I assume we'll have to come back to council for approval, is on additional dollars, both in personnel and in operating costs beyond the current city budget in totality.
That's correct. One of the things that we need to continue to keep in mind is that when those grants are funded, they're for very specific purpose and have some very specific direction. And in Middle Fork's case, it has to have a direct nexus to the watershed. And so that limits us to what we can do, and it can't be on federal property. And so those are some of the guidelines that we have to work within, neither here nor there. My position is that I'll take any grant money and use it to our benefit whenever that opportunity presents itself.
Great, thank you. And you laid out the positions, the two that you would need. The terminology is not what most fire departments use. And so I'm just curious, where do you see in the state fire training curriculum for community risk officer, specialist, educator, and even the current classifications used by most other fire departments as far as fire inspector or fire marshal, where do you see those both training and classifications fitting in to what's on your org chart as the manager and the technician?
Yeah, so city staff had some extensive conversation about that, and really the direction and the angst was about ensuring that we didn't limit the talent that was available to us. And so by broadcasting a wide net, the assumption is that we can get folks that have non-traditional skill sets. That being said, I will tell you that this all spins back to the strategic plan itself, which is fire-centric. And so I will tell you that there is some minimum qualifications that I did put into the job description that I feel strongly about. And more importantly, the opportunity to be able to bring them forward with that additional training. That training is always available to us. There is a cost for that, but as you remember with our CalJack program, we do get some reimbursement for that. So that's certainly an opportunity. And I just see it as a win-win in a holistic approach. But I will tell you that there does need to be some minimum understanding of community risk reduction.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll circle back with some comments on the positions. My last piece here, and you kind of started to hit on it with Councilwoman Amara's question, but what are the next steps here? I know we're going to talk about funding next, but how do we get this ball rolling?
Well, I think that's why we're here tonight, is to try to say there's an opportunity to move forward. We've put a robust plan in front of you, but we've also identified the limitations. And so I think at this point, it begins the next discussion. I am certainly sensitive to the fact that there are limitations within our budget. If we had no budget restraints, we would have already been doing these things. And so I think that's the balancing act for us, is being able to figure out how do we move forward incrementally and in a positive way that gets us to our end goal, and that is our complete total risk reduction for the community. So next steps is for us to continue our discussion about where do we see this going? And more importantly, when I bring these things in front of you, sometimes I think I'm not sure if I'm reaching too far. And so I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to see what I see from my perspective as your fire chief. And I think the city manager might have some comments as well.
Yeah, Mayor and Council. So basically, there are 5 elements to the things that we're looking at as far as this whole program. Program identification, the chief and Nathan, I think, have done a very good job of doing that. Resource identification. Well, we know that we have our partnerships with some of the folks, but additionally, we also have, for example, the Middle Fork grant that comes in. So there's 50,000 roughly. We're looking to make assignments. And in the one org chart that the chief presented of the entire program, we're looking to actually spread a lot of the assignments out throughout the organization. The idea of the risk reduction, as the chief mentioned, multifaceted. It's not only enforcement, it's not only collaboration, but it's also actually getting out and doing some things. The chief talked about the idea of doing maintenance along the sides of our roads to reduce the number of occurrences where, like the fire that we had a couple of months ago. Catalytic converters spitting stuff out of the back of their car. So the assignment has to be very broad. And I think the chief did a very good job in the one org chart of identifying that. The overall implementation is tied to the final point, which are our limitations. What money do we have to do this? What are the resources? I think probably one of the biggest decisions that not only this council is going to have, but also the community is what resources, what can we afford to do? The chief has given you a very robust plan. We've identified some positions. The 200,000 that we put in for the chipper program, if you combine it, it's the chipper program / abatement. The idea that we would go out and actually start doing some level of land management within the community as far as the O&M for the overall program. In so many ways, it would increase it almost 4 times if we just take the amount that we are getting from the Middle Fork grant and just take the 200,000 plus a little bit, almost increasing that 4 times. Where do we go from here? I think it really is going to come down to an overall prioritization that the council is going to have. What direction are you going to give to us? The only alternative for this money, absent going out and finding some grants, and mind you, remember, grants are doing things that other people want you to do, not necessarily with our priorities. We would have to fit whatever our priorities are into any types of grants that would come out. But the only funding source that we really have would either A, reduction in other programs that we're doing, or B, is the idea that we would look for sources of revenue. Right now, the only source would probably be, at least in that the 3-year program, would be to look to go dig into either program reduction or go into reserves. That's where we're at. The council directed that we bring back at least an overview of the program. And I think the chief and Nathan and the team did a very good job of identifying the things that we need to do. Now it's going to be our job collectively, our staff, council, community, to identify where we're going to get the resources to do it. Or the council and the community needs to make a decision of the things that we're going to do. And then there are some things that we aren't going to do. I hate to oversimplify it, but that's just the way that it is.
So just to be clear, and this is my final point, to that answer, the next steps are for this council to prioritize this work, to give direction, and to identify funding. Does that summarize what you just asked for?
Yeah, for the most part.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Again, I have some comments. Appreciate the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all the questions I have for now.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Thank you. I have a couple quick questions, hopefully. The first one was I'm looking at all of the different tasks that this new risk reduction manager would handle. And one of the key things is working with either private property within the city or all of the land that's surrounding the city, because the likelihood of it actually starting in Auburn is probably small. It's more likely it's going to come from somewhere else and then overtake the city from another direction. It'd be nice if that was outlined as a specific task. I don't know, working with outside organizations, government entities, whatever that is, because I feel like that's going to be very time consuming. From what I've heard so far, that's normally what we have the least amount of control over and what we have to spend a lot of time trying to do that outreach. So that just would be nice to have that outlined as a task, because someone who has that skill set of working with those types of agencies, I think would be helpful.
Absolutely.
And then the other piece is talking about the position. It seems like this person would do a lot of outreach to the community, program management, just a lot of working with different people and entities to try to get over a bunch of pieces to come together. Do you think it's critical that they also be able to be a firefighter and fight fires, or is it enough for them to have a knowledge of how all of these pieces, but not necessarily have that firefighting skill?
Yeah, great question. So traditionally in the world of fire prevention and community risk reduction, those are non-sworn, meaning that they're not firefighter or not operational based. And that's an important distinction, because their work and their effort is very different than what our line staff on the fire truck does. And so they need to have different skill sets, people skill sets, organizational skill sets, administrative skill sets. And so that's really an important piece. That said, there still has to be some minimum level of understanding. And that's my job as the fire chief, to ensure that they have that. And that's something that I thrive in and building not only into our staff, but our administrative staff, should we be able to have the opportunity to have that. That is something that I thrive in and really look forward to building into someone else and their skill sets.
So you see this as like a non-sworn position?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Dowden-Covey.
Yes, thank you very much, Chief. I really appreciate your putting this together. This is exactly what we needed. I know that my colleagues asked a lot of the same questions that I already had, so I just have a couple really brief questions. With regards to the chipper program, in your proposal, are you looking at a pay-as-you-go kind of a program so that the individuals that are benefiting from the chipper program would be paying for that service? Or are you thinking that would be a free service to residents?
Yeah, so I'm not particularly staunch one way or another. What I can tell you, though, is that it's private property that we're talking about, and there is some obligation for property owners to do some of their own obligation. Now, that being said, I think we can incentivize it. I think we can make it much more streamlined and effective than what maybe is currently out there. And I think in that, people might be willing to even offer more pay if the system is more efficient and more effective, right? And so those are the kind of things that I think about, but I'm not sold one way or another. I think that's why it's so important to reach out to our community, have that collaborative effort, design the program and say, this is what it looks like. Can we all buy into it together? And that's what we did with our strategic plan. And I see that being the same thing as we move forward with these new types of initiatives.
Because I can see that we would charge for the chipper program like the Resource Conservation District does. I know that it's a lower cost than normal. There are some subsidies there, but people are very happy to pay. There might be able to be a program for those that are more disadvantaged if they're not able to pay or what have you. But I just wanted to ask if you had been thinking about that in particular. And then also you talk about the community risk reduction program manager overseeing some fire corps volunteers. And I thought, can you just talk a little bit more about what you see these fire corps volunteers doing and how many and so forth? Expand upon that a little bit. You haven't really talked about that.
Certainly. So the volunteer concept has been around forever and is very effective. And this certainly is a community that has a tremendous amount of engagement. So the trick here is being able to make sure that we're able to provide clear direction and give them tasks that they can complete and feel good about. I have been part of programs in which they haven't been managed very well. And so what happens is there's disinterest in it and then they fall off and you kind of lose your volunteers folks. And so how I see this is that we have a main primary leader for this group that is a volunteer that helps us really manage this group. And then we create opportunities, initiatives for them to be a part of, that they can be the voice piece for us as we move out in the community. So I see it as a win-win. It's just a lot of things to do.
Yeah.
And so by having that primary person that we can rely on will really allow us to force multiply and be successful within that.
And we have volunteers now, correct? I mean, we have a few volunteers, do we
In the
not?
fire department,
Yes.
we do not.
Oh, okay. I thought.
We
did.
tried to start that program and we went right into COVID and
Okay,
that
so
shut
I-
us down
Oh.
and we have not been able to spin back to that
Okay.
to this point.
Well, again, my other questions with regards to, funding and operation costs and so forth have been answered, but I really do appreciate the fact that you brought this forward. You really give us something to think about. Just the next item on the agenda, Councilmember Berlant and I have a suggestion, to address something like this. This is a $1.5 million program that you're looking at that requires sustainable funding. And that's difficult because we do have monies in reserve, but we would quickly run out of money if we were to pull monies from reserve. So it's a very difficult issue, but it's incredibly important. And I'm very grateful that you brought this forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. I got a few questions. The volunteer question that I had was just asked by my counterpart up here. I guess maybe taking a half step back, other cities similar sized to Auburn that have their own fire departments. I mean, everything you have listed as far as the discrete duties of this new group all make total sense. Are other cities doing this type of thing? Is this us, Auburn, being kind of at the cutting edge of our plan, our strategic plan?
Traditionally, when you look up and down the state, municipalities have a prevention program that is focused on building safety and structural fires. We are in a unique situation where we have both risk, and that risk is significant on the wildfire side. That is, there are only a handful of ridgetop communities that are listed on the National Fire Plan, and we happen to be one of them. And so when I bring this forward, it's because I put it at that equal risk of that structural fire and life loss as the wildfire. And so trying to address and balance both of those issues is really the challenge.
Okay, so no, I think is what I heard.
No.
So I've got a couple of questions, both kind of similar and related to the same thing. The current status of, say, plan check.
Mhm.
How are we handling that right now?
So right now we use one of our engine company engineers who's been sent through the planning track, and we'll schedule that day when he's on duty. We'll pull him off the rig and assist with that. In the fact that it may be time sensitive, I'll step in on his behalf, but that is what we have. And so we deal with it as best as we can. We certainly, I identified early on when I got here that we needed some of those critical positions. And quite frankly, I didn't see a budget allocation for anything but a multifunction employee. And so that's how we've addressed it.
Got it. Now, in reading the 13 descriptions or duty descriptions that you've got here on your flow chart or your org chart, things like plan review, inspections, code enforcement, WUI inspections, defensible space inspections, all of those seems like tasks to me that, and I looked it up online to see if I could find a company out there that might be able to provide those services to the city of Auburn. Are there any companies that you're aware of that provide these types of services on a contract basis?
I don't know of any off the top of my head, primarily because some of the things that you listed were specific to what we do here. So with regard to fire inspections, we can certainly contract out fire inspections. There's no question about that. But what you're going to find is that that is specific to building structures and businesses and hood and duct systems and those kinds of things. It doesn't address our WUI inspections.
So I've seen what I think are private trucks painted up with defensible space inspection logos and things like that. I think they're out there. Have you not heard of those private companies that are out there doing home inspections, defensible space inspections, that type of thing?
So so yes, I've heard of that. One of the discussions and what I haven't been able to quantify or qualify is when you get that inspection, it has to be done by somebody who is recognized. And so whether they are recognized or not, that's the question. And so I don't have an answer for you today, but I'll certainly look into it.
I think it's along the lines of, and I can't remember if it's the Caldor fire or the River fire, whichever one it was, but I had a partner of mine in my day job who has a cabin up in Kybers, and his insurance company hired a company to come in and spray a retardant around his cabin, and his cabin was saved. So I guess that's the kind of thing I'm interested in knowing more about. Are there other opportunities other than us just hiring 2 additional FTEs? Are there other opportunities for us to maybe look at some sort of a contract-based system? I think that would give the city a little more flexibility. So I would like to hear a little more about those potential opportunities.
Absolutely.
I have no further questions. Any other questions from the council? Chief, again, thank you very much. I will open it up now to public comment. So if we have any members of the public who would like to speak on this item, we'll do a little dance at the podium and
I wish I was capable of dancing up to the podium. Those days are gone, but I couldn't be more passionate in supporting what your fire chief has brought forward to you. Let me compare this proposal to the way you manage your pavements. You have engineering studies, you have tests, you have a program where you lay out the roads and how are they going to be managed over time. And then you put resources against it, and you've done a remarkable job. Compare that to how we manage these resources of potential fire problems. It's complaint driven. It's almost as if you didn't have that pavement management program and you waited till somebody came in and said, there's a pothole on this street, go fix it, or there's a crack, go fix it. It would be crazy to manage your pavements that way. It needs to be thoughtful, planned, prioritized, and funded. And that's what he's proposing here for this one little piece of it. And I think these people who would be hired to do it, that would just be one piece of it, just one piece of it. But think how efficient it would be if his or her task was to drive around and identify these areas that many of my neighbors are reluctant to complain about. They tell me about them and I says, you have to put in a complaint. Oh, I don't want to do that for my neighbors, so it never gets done. So now we have, under this new plan, someone driving around in an organized way with a thoughtful checklist. What am I looking for? What am I trying to do? How do I prioritize this? Can I do it block by block or a section of the city or street by street? How should it all be done? None of that exists right now. And it could be incorporated that way. And then you would know the extent of the problem and how much money needs to be applied against it, how you would do it. Buying a chipper is just one way. You could hire a chipping company for 2 days a week, whatever. There's lots of ways to skin the cat, but it starts with the man hours that are required to do this effort. Many of you know I was on the city council at one point, and I can't remember ever having this type of possible death to the city on any kind of agenda. You are in a unique time and place right now, and you need to think about the life of this city is in your hands, and you need to do something about it. And you have a passionate fire chief, a good staff, and you need to support that in whatever it takes. And I'm going to suggest if I was sitting in your place, I would stop paving the streets. I would take all of that money and divert it over the next 5 or 10 years into fire protection. Because it's that important. can't be complaint driven. It has to be thoughtfully dealt with someone who wakes up in the morning, this is my job and I have to get it done. And if I don't get it done, somebody else is going to be doing it and I'm not going to be here. You need that type of focus. And I think Chief Spencer has the ability to lead and build a drive in people to take care of this thing. So couldn't support it more. Very important. The next 10 years of what we do in fire protection could be a life or death decision for this city. If you do any kind of reading about what happens to the cities when they're attacked, like Paradise was, it's generational. It takes 30 years to put it back together, if it can be put back together. Now, sustainability, the money. Let's talk about that just for a second. We had, it's been a couple of years now, we had a tax initiative. In my opinion, it got sidetracked and everybody was thinking, what else can I buy with this kind of thing? You remember the discussions. It needs to be focused. It needs to be a sales tax increase that's focused on this, a special tax that requires 2/3 vote, but it will be earmarked for these programs and others. It'll give people the kind of confidence that, oh, this is important. And you'll have, I couldn't get excited about the general tax increase. I can get excited about this and I can persuade people and help other people persuade people. Nevada County has a program where they train residents in a rather technical subject of defensible space inspections. I went up and took their 2-day course. It's not as good as what our firefighters get in their formal training, but this isn't rocket science. Do you have the screen on your vents? What's your roof? Is that bush necessary right next to your house? Those are the kind of things that go into these inspections. We could stand up a program like that where it didn't cost anything for the inspection. I wasn't trying to save him so he can put his money exactly where he needs it. We have an active city that wants to participate in this. We can solve these problems. But you have to elevate this problem to the highest place in your heart because it starts here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Hello, my name's Robert Kislev. I'm a resident of Falcons Point, your most recently recognized Firewise community. Yes. I want to thank City Council and Mayor Spokley for the opportunity to speak tonight. It's also good to be back here again in person. Especially want to thank Chief Spencer for his presentation. I think the program that he's brought up is very well thought out. I think there's a lot of potential here. One of the points that Chief Spencer talked about was resistance in the community, and to risk stating the obvious, it's not just about the cost that somebody puts into investing in risk mitigation for their own property. It's things like Measure S, right? You know, there is a resistance on a larger scale that needs to be dealt with. So obviously this is going to be a challenging issue. But I think the phased approach with the proof of concept that Chief Spencer has outlined here is very logical and a reasonable way to move forward. I would urge City Council to support the chief's efforts in regards to the dedicated staffing. You need someone whose full-time job is to manage this and to watch it and to lead it. And to get the program done, we need a comprehensive solution to this. There's many components to this, and we need leadership from City Council. I know this is a hard decision and a big decision. There's a lot of money involved, but this is our biggest risk. You know, if we have a catastrophic fire here in town, the other programs are moot. We need to address this, and we really need to make sure that you as City Council show that leadership and go out in front of the community to show that this is what we need and why we need to do that. So again, thank you, Chief Spencer, and appreciated the presentation.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public want to speak on this item? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Donna Silva. I live on Woodcrest Way, which is right up behind Placer High School. So I'm very near to the canyon rim. So I certainly understand the severity of this issue in our town. I'm also by profession a government finance professional. So I heard some allusions, some references to it, but I just have to say that I just have to urge caution when trying to find the funding for a program like this. I've heard the $1.5 million program being thrown about here this evening, and it's not a $1.5 million program. That's a 3-year cost. But positions like this go on in perpetuity, and they tend to inflate at about 5% per year. So it looks to me like you're looking at about a $400,000 annual program just in staffing alone. I forget what the annual cost was, close to $800,000. The lion's at least half of that's going to inflate annually. You're going to have unfunded pension liabilities. So it's going to be an ongoing cost. And it's never a good idea to fund an ongoing cost with a one-time revenue, like a grant or reserves. So I would just, as a citizen of Auburn, I would strongly encourage you to find a sustainable revenue source to pay for these ongoing costs. One-time use of reserves to purchase a chipper, that might make sense, but to pay for staff, no, not a good idea. So I just had to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public? Okay. Amy, do we have any?
I do have 2 emails that were received as public comment. They've been provided to the city council and are available in my office. So that completes public comment.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the council for comment. Councilmember Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. First, I just want to thank our firefighters, specifically those that we hired additionally 2 years ago to do this work. I don't want to forget that fact that part of our increase from one station to a second station was to do fuel reduction work, and they did it. But I think that as we've seen, the challenges in staffing have come to fruition to us not being able to do that with the firefighting staff. I also think that we have to give credit to Battalion Chief D'Ambrosi, who has taken on the task. The bird dog, many residents, complaint driven, albeit, but staff have really worked hard towards this issue. But it really is a funding issue to get the work done and a time issue of our personnel to do it. So I know, I think the positions that the chief you are bringing forward is a must. I do think that a couple things I think we should think about is ensuring that they are aligned with NFPA standards. Again, these classifications, this is not a reinvention of the wheel. It was asked what other fire departments do. There are already standards. There is already state curriculum that is out there. And so I think making sure that these are in line with the national standard, with the state standard. And so whether we call that a fire inspector, or a deputy fire marshal, or a community risk reduction specialist or officer, that's the path we need to go down towards these positions, because there is a candidate pool, there is a focus, there is already a knowledge, there's already experience. We just need to tap into it in our community and allow us to have staff that have that focus. I'm sad that Bob left. I have had plenty of time in meetings to argue with Bob on why his issues may not be achievable, but I agree with everything he said up there. Every single thing he said up there, it is on the five of us, right? It absolutely is on the five of us to get this moving. And so I think moving away from complaint driven, as Bob mentioned, and he didn't really mention this, but Bob is I think our #1 complainer, and not in a bad way by any means. Oh, he's outside. Bob helps ensure.
There he is, Bob.
Bob is essentially, I'm glad you are, because but Bob's point about volunteers and others, Bob is the one that's really, I think, gets the credit for ensuring most of the properties in Auburn are getting cleared, but that's on Bob to do. And so I think, as he was saying, being more strategic is where this plan gets us. So I know there's other comments, but I would at least give direction that we have the fire chief return to council with a formal budget request for a community risk reduction position with a job description. The funding piece, which is, I know, as the city manager laid out, an important piece, but I think that can wait till the next item for discussion. So thank you again to the chief for this plan. Just like the last plan, I look forward to us actually getting it done. And I would note, I counted up in the last plan that you put together, the WUI strategic plan, you've accomplished 14 items, and there's 13 more that are ongoing. So there's still work to be done in that plan. And so that was not an on-the-shelf plan. There are still things we need to do. We just now need to give the resources and then figure out the funding. Again, the funding, the next item. So I would ask that the council would agree with that direction and have staff bring back that at the nearest available opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Alice Dunn-Cavill.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree with Councilman Berlant on this. The time is now. We really need to take action on this. So I do look forward to seeing the job descriptions. I'd like to see those class specs put together so we can consider those. But we can't be complacent any longer. We have to take action. And the big question, and again, we're going to get into this next item, is sustainable funding. Because again, we heard also from Donna, but this is true. We can't fund this with reserves, because really we need a sustainable funding source. So we can't wait any longer. Our fire department's been doing a good job so far. I'm very appreciative of the work they've accomplished, but they are tethered, and they are tethered by dollars. And we need to step up. We need to take a leadership role here. This is incredibly important to me, highest priority, and I look forward to, as we move forward with more information on this and implementing this plan.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Amara.
Yes, thank you very much. I approach this a little differently. I agree with the job description as laid out, but more importantly, I think a catastrophic fire is going to come outside the city limits of Auburn. This person is important and critical, because this person could be a dedicated person to work with the county. And as I indicated, enforce regulations down in the canyon, work on the no camping, work on issues where we have individuals who are transient, maybe not some transient, who are lighting fires. We need some people who are out and about. It's not just about what's happening in our homes in the city limit. We have a very small area. So we need someone who could be dedicated. It takes time to work with other jurisdictions. And if we had a person who was dedicated, we would have that opportunity. To me, that's critical. To me, that should be happening right now. And I do agree that we need to look into our budget now and get this thing rolling and going. We also need a sustainable source for the future. We have to look at everything in our budget. I know we planned on mutual aid with our 7 firefighters. That didn't happen this year, but in the future that will be happening. Maybe for me, I need to see the budget, the proposed budget come back. If we're going to bring it out for a sales tax, I want specificity. I want to see what other opportunities we have out there. But we do need a way to fund this ongoing. And obviously, one-time money isn't going to do it. So I am supportive of bringing it back for a job description. And I'm hoping that the job description will encompass working with other jurisdiction and establishing rules and regulations during peak fire season. So that's my input.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Thank you. I concur with what my other council people have said. I think that this is a critical issue. It's very important. I am concerned about sustainable funding moving forward. This is a somewhat new thing that we haven't had to deal with in this, as Bob said, in this magnitude before. And so I think that that's felt through our community. Unlike Daniel, I don't think it's the five of us. I think it's our whole community needs to come together. We all need to prioritize this as a community, and we need to be willing to pay for it. Because I think that the community, I don't necessarily know if a sales tax is the right direction. I think that you're choosing to live in on a beautiful mountaintop next to a huge forest, and that might be something that you need to pay for those additional fire resources in order to have that opportunity without having that fire risk. So I think that we can come together as a community really and put this together a way to get it funded, because we all get the benefits of living in wonderful Auburn. We need to also make sure that we all protect it as a community and that we all put it as our top priority, and it's not just the city council fighting for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. In general, I agree with my fellow council members' comments. I do want to just reiterate what I mentioned, that there might be a balance between contracting some of these services out versus hiring that second full-time equivalent. It might provide the council with an opportunity to wade into this new program and all the other things about sustainable funding and reliable funding. Obviously, that absolutely has to be a part of this program moving forward. But we contract out for plan check services. We contract out for planning services. There might be some of these activities that are detailed in the chief's report that are logical things that could be contracted out, at least initially, as we move into this new program. So those are my thoughts. I think you've got pretty clear direction from us, Chief. Great. Thank you again for your presentation. Let's go ahead and move on. All right, next up is item number 7. We're doing 9. Totally confused. All right, we're doing 9 next. That's the Wildfire and Public Safety Funding Committee concept, and I'll ask Councilmember Lant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Before you is a proposal that Councilwoman Downing Calvillo and myself partnered on. And essentially, this really takes the elephant in the room of our last meeting and even this meeting's discussion about, we all have signified, and whether it's just the 5 of us or as Councilwoman Riddell Harris said, the community, that we need to do more and we need to ensure that it's sustainable. I don't know if everyone realizes that was our city treasurer that came and gave us some advice. And I think that really does dovetail very well into this next item. So in front of you is the concept of developing a wildfire and public advisory ad hoc committee. The purpose of this committee would be to serve as an advisory capacity to us to assess the related city services. So all of these things that the chief just discussed, evaluate funding for these items for wildfire prevention, fire protection, and public safety. To review all of these elements with 3 main objectives. The first objective, assess current services and needed measures related to wildfire preparedness, prevention, and protection from a public safety perspective, which should include those support services such as law enforcement and public works. Second objective, review current city funding sources, the city's public safety budget, as well as past funding proposals, and even other state and regional public safety funding sources. So looking at what we're doing in our own budget today, what money may be available, what money may be able to be redirected. A lot of people worked hard on the proposal that went into Measure S, the proposal that didn't go into Measure S, and there are other efforts through fire departments around us, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The third objective is to make a recommendation to City Council on a plan for funding enhanced public safety efforts for all the things that we discussed. The idea of this ad hoc committee is a 12-person membership made up of varying levels of stakeholder groups, 5 city residents nominated by each council person, an Auburn business owner, and then members nominated by a series of groups, including the Greater Auburn Fire Safe Council, the Auburn Chamber of Commerce, an Auburn Environmental Protection Organization, the Placer County Taxpayers Association, as well as our fire chief or designee and our police chief or designee. This committee and these 12 members and anybody else from the public who wants to participate would be educated, would dive into solutions for funding, and then come back to the city council within 120 days with a report to us on how do we ensure that we have funding, how do we ensure that it's sustainable. There is no, at least from my perspective, and I think Councilwoman Donna Calvillo, who I'll turn to next, preconceived notion of where this goes. Obviously, we tried a tax measure. Obviously, we've been able to redirect existing funds. I think that our city treasurer's comments as well all play into this, but we need a group to really dive into how do we do this and how do we do this now. So before we take questions, I want to turn it to Councilwoman Donna Calvillo, who again is bringing this forward.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that. We really are turning to the community here, and we're looking at stakeholders who can buy into this solution. And we think that the composition will really truly provide us with the various stakeholder input we truly need, and to get that committee support. It isn't just about us, it's about our community. And so I really look forward to the establishment of this particular ad hoc committee. The meetings would be open to the public, so individuals could come and participate and provide input. But truly, we want these individuals to dive into the issue, to take a look at everything that's been done in the past, pull out components that are important, just like this strategic plan we just heard today. This is a perfect example. And Councilman Berlant and I were talking about how appropriate it was that we had this particular plan come up. And this is something that we wanted to put out there as an opportunity to look at how could we fund this? What kind of sustainable funding opportunities are there? And so we do have a finite amount of time. We looked at Roseville City Council, or actually Roseville, they had a similar ad hoc committee when they were looking at the expenditure of monies for a variety of sources. And they were able to get their stakeholders to the table and to participate, and they were very successful. So I look forward to that same success. There may be additional individuals that our colleagues feel should be on as members, but really we thought that this was a good example. We didn't want it to be too large of a committee. It's already pretty big, but really these are the key stakeholders and that we feel that could provide very valuable information and recommendations to us. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any other comments from the council on this item?
I'd like
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Council.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, I just had
Councilwoman.
I haven't worked on something like this before yet. Is it possible to put in here that the meetings would happen outside of regular business hours? Because I know one of the things that tends to happen on a lot of the fire meetings that I'd like to attend is that they're during work hours. And so I'd like to have as much participation from the public as possible. So I'd just like to make sure that the meetings aren't held during work hours. if that's possible.
So what I would envision is that we would have, meetings at all different times. So there might be one during work hour, there might be one even on a Saturday or what have you, but trying to give the greatest opportunity. And then also, if we could do them by Zoom, that would be great to offer more public input as well.
So this wouldn't have a standing meeting of this committee?
They would have, once the committee was established, they would establish their meeting
Yeah.
schedule. And so those are the kinds of things that they would take into consideration. But I would think that it would be important to have it at all different times.
But the standing meeting, I'd like to ensure that that doesn't happen during the workday.
Mhm.
So that
Well-
way, whoever wants to can attend.
To answer your question, and I also modeled this, as Councilwoman Galvin Calvillo said, we modeled this after the Roseville Community Priorities Advisory Committee, but also after how we developed, Mayor Spokely and I, the Homeless and Transient Task Force. And I think a lot of your concerns and questions are good, but I think that really is best left to the committee to make that determination of both who will chair it as well as their meetings. And so in the concept, at least, I didn't get into that level of detail, no different than all of our other committees. It's left to the committee make that determination.
And I understand, and I just think this is such a critical issue for the whole community. And I know that a lot of people who would have the time to be on this committee and attend it on a weekly basis or a regular basis, maybe people who aren't working right now. And I just want to make sure that there's the opportunity for input from people who are working, so we don't have meetings that are put at a time when they wouldn't be able to participate. Because I know this is important to get the whole committee or the whole community involved in this and not just people who have the time during the middle of the day. That's my concern.
Vice Mayor Mara?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, and I would agree with Councilwoman Riddell Harris. We have to be available, make it available, and have an opportunity for each and everyone. This is, this is a citywide issue, and it belongs to everybody. With that being said, I like the makeup. I would just add, I think, sales tax has been thrown around. Downtown Business Association, Old Town Business Association should be a part of it. And again, opened up to the public with a lot of input and hopefully suggestions that can be given to City Council from the public as well.
One thing we thought about, because Councilman Berlant and I, when we were coming up with membership, is that we recognize with our business associations that everyone is so incredibly busy. They've got so many different issues on their plate. And we identified one Auburn business owner, but we also have someone that's nominated by the Chamber of Commerce. That does not preclude DBA or Old Town Business Association from participating, but we were just trying to not obligate them to just yet another meeting. But we would absolutely encourage their participation in this.
If I can note, the reason that we specifically took it out was we had it specifically in the Homeless Transient Task Force meeting, mainly because they came, but because it was after hours and not during the workday, there was almost no representation by OTBA and DBA, simply based on the time. And so I think we made it more specific to not just letting the associations have to appoint somebody who may not be as interested, but rather asking anybody who owns a business or can represent the chamber to be involved.
And give them an opportunity to nominate someone to come to their group. It doesn't necessarily have to be the president. It could be someone from the group, a representative that belongs to the association, and that can speak at their meetings, be a spokesperson for their association. I think that's critical. We have to reach as many people as we can, and that would be my suggestion.
My thought would be to invite the associations to see if they're interested in nominating someone before we actually add them to the committee membership, just to see if they indeed are have one of their members that would be interested in serving on the committee before we task them with nominating someone, because that really is what the issue was. Of the concern was that we didn't want to task them with nominating someone, and then if they didn't have anybody, and then their seat at the table is always vacant, and that's not productive either. But we certainly would survey them, and if they have someone that they would like to nominate, someone who would like to actively participate, then we absolutely could consider them.
Can we also invite the Firewise communities as well? Make sure that they know when these meetings are, because I mean, they don't necessarily need to be on the membership, but I'd hope that they'd want to be involved in this as well.
Absolutely. We have one member that would be nominated from the Greater Auburn Area Fire Safe Council, but the communities as well. I think that, again, these meetings would be open to the public, and we would need to have them noticed properly. And certainly, I'm sure we can do a notification to our Firewise community. I'm sure that those members would like to participate in this process, and we would encourage that.
And if I can add back to Councilwoman Amara's point, I'm happy as the OTBA rep, and I know you're the DBA rep, to go back and find out, because I don't think there's any thoughts of exclusion. It's more back to, I think there's even a vacancy on the HDRC for the Downtown Business Association. So, forcing representation versus making it offered in not just the past couple of years, but, you know, current.
Mm.
That's the reason why we didn't put it on there. But I'm happy to come back to the group with ODPA.
Yeah.
And I think the modeling after what we did in 2017 with the transient homeless task force is a great way to go. So I'm certainly fully supportive of this. With that, I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment and invite anybody up who wants to speak on this item.
Just very briefly, I would like to support this. I think the approach, particularly in terms of the committee membership and with Councilmember Zamara's suggestions, makes a lot of sense. And having seen how the homeless transient task force did shake out, I think it makes a lot of sense. The first objective, I'm not sure I totally understand, so I'm not sure I'm in agreement with that in terms of the assessment of services that this particular board would make. It seems to me that this would be more focused in terms of actually dealing with the funding as opposed to what the actual scope would be for those services. And that's kind of how I'm reading that. But overall, I think this is a good plan.
Great, thank you very much. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, Amy, do we have any online comments?
Bob had to.
City staff assigned to this committee? City staff assigned?
The chiefs are both assigned to it.
The both of the chiefs.
Yes, we have
Or
Auburn,
designee.
the Auburn Fire Chief or his designee, and the Auburn Police Chief or his designee.
All right. So this formally, just procedurally, this will come back in the form of a resolution to us at our next meeting.
Can I do one more quick question? Sorry. On objective one, is that going to be are we taking the prioritized list that we get from the chief and using that, or are these people going to be reprioritizing what the chief tells us to do?
So to answer Rob's question and the vision at least was that they would assess what is it that we're doing today? What are the firefighters doing today?
Mhm.
What is it that they need to do? And then how do we fund that?
Didn't the chief already do those first two pieces?
But he didn't determine how to fund those
Yeah.
actions.
Yes, I know, but number one is saying that they would assess, but the assessment, number one's check, already done. So do we need to have them?
But the
do
group
another
hasn't
assessment?
done that. The group hasn't assessed what it is that we're doing and what we're not doing to then determine what it is we need to fund.
So they're going to review the assessment. that the
Yes.
chief did.
Correct.
Yes, and they may have some of their own ideas as well, depending on, we have such a variety of membership here, so there may be other things that they'd like to recommend to us.
Okay.
And we're
Well, if I can
trying.
use a quick example, the chipper program, the chief
Mhm.
talked about it in concept, but he didn't get into the weeds
Mhm.
and lay out the specifics. So I think one thing that at least I would envision this group to look at is, are we currently doing chipping service? How would we do the chipping service? What are the options for the chipping service? And what are those costs to those options?
Okay. And we would prefer to have this committee do it than staff? I'm asking staff, is that the best? I'm just curious because I don't know if it's more efficient if you guys determine how to do the program or us, given this committee.
Thank you for the question. This process is exactly the same as how we stood up our strategic plan. We reached out to stakeholders to come to participate in that process. We come as fire department subject matter experts to say, these are what we believe to be the highest priorities. These are the things that we need to accomplish. We're having trouble trying to figure out how do we accomplish it in an effective and efficient manner, as well as sustainably funded. And so that starts that dialogue, and then there becomes consensus, and then we end up with an end product. And I think that's,
Okay.
so when you look at the strategic plan, that's exactly how we did it.
Okay, thank you.
All righty, I'm not seeing any other comments. So we'll go ahead and close this item and move on to our
Do we-
final.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask our city manager, would you like us to take official action in establishing this committee tonight? Or would you prefer that we do this at the next meeting? Well, it's on the agenda,
for
except
discussion.
for it's this discussion item only, so I guess.
Needs to come back.
No, we'll take the direction, we'll bring it back in with a resolution, and we will also bring back a schedule. So 2 weeks, and then we will launch this thing.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, one more quick question. Is there a time frame on this committee to come back with something?
Yeah, it's on there. It's
120 days.
120
Oh,
days.
the 120
120
days.
days.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we're going to move on to our final item of the evening, and I see a lot of people waited for this item, so I apologize for the late hour. This is our quarterly homeless strategic plan update. And John, you're going to be taking this? I don't see.
Mayor and
Keith.
council, if people are here for the item, I know the chief is on line right now. They can do it, or if people aren't here, you can always receive and file the report if you'd like. So your druthers.
I think maybe we can ask the chief to kind of zip through this. It is important to many of the folks that I see in the audience here, so.
Working on it, working on it. Well, good evening, Mayor, City Council members, Ryan Canan, your Chief of Police. And as we were just speaking about, I will do the quarterly homeless presentation. And I'll bring up my screen. And I think, or not. You'd think we'd have this whole thing dialed in by now.
Chief, I can show your presentation if you'd like.
No, I think I got it. Maybe. No, yes. On. That looks like it. Well, so as the council knows, so it was really almost 3 years ago now that we started on this venture of developing our 3-year homeless strategic plan. I know one of the things we talked about the last quarterly presentation was whether or not we need to do the quarterly presentation. And the goal was just to finish out this 3-year plan and to see where we ended up. So this is a year-to-date, January to June of 2021, with some of the information and some of the updated comparisons to the last 3 years. And really, we have 2 more quarterly presentations, and we'll throw together kind of a whole package of information and what we found over the last 3 years and what we found in this plan. But we know 2 things that we set out to do. One was our chronic homeless, reduce the numbers by 10%. First, obviously, we had to identify what that number was. We did after the first year. We had about 41 chronic homeless, and that was based on the 2 different definitions. One was the Marbit studies, which talks about a person who's been homeless more than 1 year, straight year, has had 4 homeless episodes in 3 years, or is a homeless person with a disabling condition. And then we added our definition to help us track better. And that was a person contacted 4 months during a rolling 12-month period, as well as objective number 2, which is to reduce those nuisance type calls that we identified early by 10% as well. And again, we had to go back and we had to, get the baseline, but we had to identify what those nuisance type calls were. And what we landed on was camping, loitering, panhandling, trespassing, and suspicious activity. We know that, again, we had the ad hoc homeless transit committee that was created back in 2018 and really put together a lot of information and kind of a framework for us to go on to address the homeless and transit situation within our own community. So again, like I said, we're wrapping up the 3rd year now. We have some highlights. One is in 2020, we identified 32 chronic homeless individuals, and now we're down to 25 in comparison to last year. There's some things we've found with this. One, the services that are available through Placer County and Health and Human Services, as well as others. So we're able to get some of these folks home, into housing, get the resource they need. You'll notice it's about a 22% decrease comparison to last year. And then, sorry, going back real quick, maybe not. Try to go back. Gonna keep going forward. I really want to get through this presentation. It's a long night, can't you tell? So again, like we talked about, it was a 22% reduction overall since the beginning of the strategic plan. We've seen actually a 39% reduction in our chronic homeless population. So community calls for service, again, these are the new ones we talked about. We've seen a reduction in camping. Loitering continues to be one of the ones that has increased. I think a lot of that could be people are calling us, letting us know what's going on. Also, it could be the difference between some of the panhandling, since panhandling is not necessarily the crime or reason for people to call. So I think oftentimes it gets categorized as a loitering. And then our trespassing and suspicious activity there, we continue to see a decrease in the nuisance type calls. Again, overall, we have a 19% reduction. And obviously it's 27 total calls for service that we've seen reduced. And then the interesting part about the suspicious activity. So again, in my last presentation, we talked about how we were tracking this, and in the new system, it didn't line up the same way as the old system did. So we're tracking that one on its own separately. But out of the homeless that were related or connected with the suspicious activity and the old way of reporting it, as well as the new way of reporting it, the percentage stays about the same. It's about 9% of those suspicious activity calls are associated with someone who has an address unknown or is considered to be homeless. Some notable information, as we're going through this third year, some of the questions and research we're looking for and trying to do is, we identified that 11 of our 25 identified chronic homeless individuals appear, based on our assessment, we're not doctors or anything else, but have some type of mental illness. So that's almost half of the folks that we come in contact, along with just the time they've been homeless. Some of them have obviously dependency issues on drugs and alcohol, some of the services and housing. So 17 of the 25 individuals have told us where they originally came from. So if it's Auburn or another city within Placer County, or even outside the region, what we do know is 5 of those 17 that told us said that they are originally from Auburn, and that 14 of the 17 in total are actually from somewhere in the Placer County region. And then the 3 of the 17 are obviously outside the region. So shows that a number of them, a large majority of them, are from this area and choose to continue to stay here. And obviously the resources aren't that far for the ones that are up at the DeWitt Center for us. And then, when we start talking about some of these relationships, the 25 identified that we have all average, they average 9 years of being homeless. And some of those ranges, as long as 28 years to under 1 year if they've been contacted by us more than 4 times or have some type of mental illness. And then one question, with Project Roomkey that was out there. So 3 of those 25 participated in Project Roomkey. The others obviously did not. And then, so that's kind of where we are with some of the new data. We talk about the hotspots. As you can see, we talked about this last presentation, this reporting district 12. You see here in this picture, it's the Nevada train stations in there along the Auburn Ravine Road and our shopping centers, as well as right there at Fullweiler, Elm, and Highway 49. So that's a number of our calls for service are coming from as it relates to these nuisance type calls that we track. And again, always encourage everybody to call us. Let us know what's going on. As you can see, the information doesn't fall on deaf ears. We're data informed police department. We need the data to identify where we're headed next and what we need to be focused on. We can't do that if we don't know the data. So a couple more highlights. So we run our CAT operations pretty much almost weekly. Part of our budget and our overtime budget includes the funding for the overtime operations for our community action team and the posting of camps as well. Some follow-up at the last presentation, we had a public comment about some issues going on at College Way. The next day we reached out to the caller and looked to immediately address some of the issues that were going on in that area. We called out our partners, Public Works, to start cleaning up some of the landscaping. Oftentimes we talk about the crime prevention through environmental design program, and that's just one of those things, as well as cameras and lighting in that area. I think we had a good follow-up and good discussion with that caller who made the public comments. And then at the last council meeting, there was another public comment of homeless and how they're being treated. It was in a different jurisdiction that we followed up on. But again, I want to make sure that our folks are encouraged to call us and let us know what's going on. Again, we're using our new CAD RMS system to its fullest, at least working on using it to its fullest potential. And we're able to do that with data and information. There's any questions?
All righty, thank you, Chief. Appreciate that report. Vice Mayor Amara.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for the reduction in homeless. I just have two quick questions. The first one's very easy. Would you please tell us the telephone number for people to call? Because I've been talking with individuals who have some complaints about Nevada Street, but can you recite it and I'll write it down and maybe the public who's listening can?
Sure. So we have our phone number. So it's 530-823-4237. You can reach us by email at records@auburn.ca.gov. And then you can also go to the city's website, and on the police departments, or actually even on the front page of the city's website, it actually says report a concern. And if you go to that citizen request tracker, what comes up is a number of items, but specifically under the police department does talk about illegal camps, narcotic tips, graffiti, as well as crime tips.
Thank you very much. And it's excellent that we have 3 opportunities to get a hold of you for this purpose. And then just, you might have answered this, but in a couple of words, how do you attribute the reduction in the homeless population?
Well, I think a big part of it is the constant contact that we can make with folks and the ability to build that rapport. I think what we're finding is that we've reached a point now, and I think, over the next 6 months, and when we're able to really study it, but I think you start looking at the number of contacts that we make with people, our partnerships with Health and Human Services, and the ability to get these folks the help that they actually need. And I think that's a big part of it. We've had people go into housing and come out of housing. I think we have one individual who did this 3 different times in the last several months. So a big part of it is getting to the people the right resources that they actually need. And we know people suffer from a wide variety of issues of why they're homeless, if they're down on their luck or something, whatever that might be. But we're not the experts in a lot of the services they need. We're just the ones that are out there making that contact and bringing partnerships with us to them.
And thank you very much. And I want to say that you should be congratulated, your team, for this progress. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Lack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for the report. I just have 2 questions for you. Do you have, not to put you on the spot on this, but do you have the number of hours the CAT team was out in this reporting cycle versus the last?
I don't have that information right with me now, but I can follow up and get it back to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Do you have any idea? I mean, were they out at the same? What I'm looking for is to see, is there a correlation with the reduction in the number of camping incidents with the reduction of our proactive CAT team going out there and finding them? Or were they out there the same amount of time and really did see a 50% less number of camps than the quarter before?
Yeah, so I mean, they've been going out at about the same rate that they have been consistently all year. Some of it's hit or miss depending on staffing and everything else. But kind of your question is the correlation between we're not finding the camp, or because we're not out as much that we're not reporting as many camps back? And are you talking about the nuisance, the call type, or are you talking about the other section that tracks the CAT operations?
Well, the number that was to me a success was the 50% increase or decrease, excuse me, in camping calls. And so what I was just trying to figure out is there a connection to our enforcement numbers compared to a decrease in camping, or do we really have a 50%, which is a pretty dramatic decrease in camping calls or camping situations this quarter?
So the camping, the nuisance calls is what our community is calling us with. So that's what the community is, what they are seeing and what they're reporting back to us when it comes to those nuisance calls. The proactivity on the CAT team's part is tracked a little bit differently, but they're the ones going out there typically to where known locations are, where typical camps go. But also there was another component to this is camping calls. Well, we get called necessarily might not actually be camp product that's being stored somewhere. There was a time period when we end up with a shopping cart kind of parked on one of the curbs in the corners, and it was tied to, I think, one of the traffic poles. And so that, although it might come into us as a camping call, it's actually not a camping call. It's just property being stored in a public place. So some of it is actually cleaning up the way we are tracking and receiving these calls. So
Well,
there's
I know as one person who called about the cart chained to the stoplight, I didn't use the word camping in coordination with it. But just to be clear, then what you're saying is the negative 50% or the 50% decrease in camping is initiated calls by the public. Those have nothing to do with what the CAT team may go out and proactively find.
correct. Those are calls directly from the community. So it's what the community is or not saying.
Great. Well, thank you. My last question then, and you kind of referenced it at the top, but what are the next steps? If I'm not mistaken, you conclude, the report out that was initially directed to you. Where do we go now with the strategic plan or a next iteration of the strategic plan?
Well, I think the great part is once we finish wrap up this 6 months and we are able to start breaking the information down, finding out what are the questions we need to ask or what resources we need to move in the next iteration of this. When you're talking about 25 chronic homeless individuals where they all collectively average 9 years, that's a lot of time for someone to be homeless and become familiar with it and continue to choose that lifestyle. There's also a number of them who have dependency issues. So this gives us an opportunity to look at what resources we need and what other partnerships that we can bring in to help those folks get the help. I think this program and our efforts over the last 3 years has really been able to focus on those individuals who have not been homeless that long, but again, like I mentioned earlier, fallen on hard times and maybe lost their job and lost their home, which very well could be the next iteration, given where we are with COVID and even the landlord tenant issues that may arise out of it. But I think this gives us an opportunity and kind of a global picture of what the issues are within the city of Auburn. So the next step will be, like I said, identify what resources will help the majority of our chronic homeless, as well as those partnerships. And I know a big part of it is the region is looking to come together and identify a plan on how to address that. And so I think that's a big next step to it is to we're the ones actually tracking it. We have the information. I think that's what makes this program successful, is that we're not just guessing on what our homeless issues are, but we actually have the data. We've identified people, by name and who they are and what issues that they have. So I think those are some of the positives for the next step.
Great. Thank you, Chief. And I look forward to the numbers of from the CAT hours. Thank you very much.
Councilwoman Dowden-Calvillo.
Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate the update and congratulations on the numbers. I had a question with regards to some of our regional activities with regards to homeless. About a month or two ago, we had a regional meeting with cities and county, the cities in Placer County as well as the county, and they established a regional task force looking at homeless. And I believe you were participating in that. Can you give us a little bit of an update on those activities?
So actually, I was not, I know with Zoom or a little convoluted, but Tucker Huey is one of my lieutenants who attended that meeting. And I think he's in the waiting room on Zoom, Amy.
I can provide an update. I was on the call this morning.
Oh, you
It
were?
actually happened this morning.
Oh,
the
okay.
first
Yeah.
call.
Could you give us an update on that?
Sure. Right now.
Sure.
So we did convene the task force or the ad hoc task force this morning. It was a relatively short meeting. More just about introductions and comments. We all got an opportunity to talk a little bit about homeless in our communities. So we certainly ran through all the cities and the counties. County got a chance to talk about it as well. I will tell you, the whole conversation got a little bit sidetracked with the proposed gathering in facility that's in the unincorporated areas of Placer County. I think it's down near Rockland. I think it's called Campus of Hope.
I was going to actually ask about that second, because I know that there is a proposal. I think it's outside of Lincoln, actually, the Campus of Hope facility.
I think it's near Santucci Center.
Yes, it's sort of in between the jail and the casino. So the proposed site, which I was interested in receiving the regional task force update. So you just had your first initial meeting then over Zoom, and okay, so.
Yeah, and again, it was really just a chance for each of the mayors or council people who were on the call to introduce their community situation with the homeless situation. I talked about our task force, and I talked about the CAT work that Chief Canan and his officers are doing. Thank the county for the collaboration, because that was going to be my question for you, Chief, is do we still have probation that joins you on your outings, as well as occasionally, I think I heard last from you that you every once in a while will have a Health and Human Services representative.
We do. Yeah, to answer that question, we do. We have a good relationship with probation as well as Health and Human Services. And that's a big part of it. Like we talked about, it's going to take a continued group effort to address the homeless concerns, within all of our communities. But it's going to come down to, as a collective group. And I think this is a couple of things that Lieutenant Huey will talk about their first meeting, but we got to identify a common goal between whether it's city, county, or whomever. So I'd like to kick it over to Lieutenant Huey, see if he has anything to add from their first meeting.
Yeah, so the operational side of the meeting was a lot of trying to establish kind of a common vernacular. As all the different stakeholders are operating off a different definition based on what their mission needs are. And so really establishing the definition of who we're trying to address and what specific needs those isolated groups of all the umbrella of the homeless issue creates. And with that, identifying any gaps in services, any options we have to gain new services, new partnerships to be able to fill those gaps. And ultimately, what a successful implementation of the program looks like. We need a goal so we can work towards that goal. And so it's getting all of the stakeholders together to kind of identify some of those key points before we can continue any further down.
And how often will you be meeting? Did they establish a schedule?
There's various groups. There's kind of a core group, and then they kick it down. So I don't definitively know. I think they have something slotted monthly for at least the next couple months.
Okay, thank you. I see our city manager raising his hand.
Yeah, no, I was on the same meeting as Tucker, and we're going to meet probably as often as the main coordinating group is. One is going to be more of the fact finding, getting data, getting information that eventually is going to be fed up to the group that is predominantly of electeds.
Okay.
Yeah, the one thing that Lieutenant pointed out, very multifaceted. You've got public agencies, you got private agencies, you've got state, county, cities. They're all doing various things. The interface between law enforcement and the service organizations. So I think Lieutenant and I are on the committee that's going to be gathering a lot of information that's going to get pushed out. So we'll see, but probably the frequency is going to mirror what the main group is doing with the elected. So I would imagine that they're going to call for our next meeting probably within the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that update. And the other request I wanted to make is with regards to, and our mayor alluded to this, the Campus of Hope project. I would love to have an informational item just to kind of bring the council up to date, because that is a project that's out there and it will impact us. They're not proposing something within the city limits, of course, but it will certainly impact our homeless population. So it'd be great to have an informational item on that if you could coordinate that in the next couple of months or so, weeks or meetings, whatever works for your schedule.
Yep, you can do that.
Any other questions for the chief? Okay, we'll do comments in just a minute. Any members of the public have a question or comments for the chief? Warn you guys out. Okay, seeing none. We'll go ahead and come back for comments. Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
I just wanted to say thank you to the chief and all the staff. Looks like they've done a great job and I really appreciate it. That's it.
Great. Any other comments? All right, chief, thank you very much for the presentation. Appreciate it. Tucker, thank you. You guys have a good night. All right, we are getting close to being done here. We will jump to reports. And as customary, we'll start off with city manager report.
Mayor and council, just a couple of items. First on COVID, just a quickie update on where we're at right now in the hospital. Still very impacted, 161 cases countywide. Realize that because of the amazing healthcare that we have here in Placer County, actually more than half of the people that are in the hospitals are from out of county. 86 of the 161 are from Placer County, 47 in the ICU, 22 of which are from Placer County. So again, getting folks from out. One of the key little points to maybe point out, of the 91 cases that are currently hospitalized in Placer County, only 15 were vaccinated. So say what you will about the vaccine. For Auburn, within our zip code, 2,400 cases since they started tracking all of it. The overall case rate, our positivity rate is 6.7%, which is actually a little bit down from where it was 2 weeks ago. And the 14-day, over the past 14 days, things have gone up by about 3.6%. Throughout the county, an interesting thing of all the tests that have been done within Placer County, 554,000 of those tests were negative out of all the various testing that's been going on. So overall, hospitals are still impacted. Lots of people in ICU, lots of people in the hospital, but I'm the last person to ask about where it's going, but it looks like it's gone down just a little bit. So second thing in my report, I've been introducing our new economic and planning manager a lot. And I guess I haven't introduced him at a planning commission. So why don't I call up Jonathan Wright to come up here, and I've started getting pretty good at introducing him. Jonathan brings just a slew of experience to us. The best thing, small city experience. For 7 years, he was the city manager of the city of Reedsport, which is up in Oregon. And being that small city type, lots of experience. He brings a lot of experience in both planning and economic development. He was actually a county planner in what he's done. Jonathan is also a veteran. He served in the U.S. Army and representing our country. So good things that way. He is most recently, some of the key tasks that he's got working with us, economic development. I will tell you that it's been awesome. He and I have met with some very good developers, people looking to do projects here. in Auburn. We're starting to get some success. We're on the verge of making a big announcement of at least one major company that is coming, and he and I are, yeah, that's what you said last week. But anyway, there's that. Also, he is doing one of the key aspects of his job will be working at the Auburn Airport, mostly in the leases and working with our businesses out there on an interim basis. We've slid some of the airport management things over to him. So he's got plenty of things on his plate that way. Coming up October 13th, we're going to be having a stakeholders meeting out there, and Jonathan and I have been kind of working on things for that. But I will tell you, an incredible addition to our team. He's already making an impact. And so I introduced you, Jonathan Wright. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Jonathan. Glad to have you on board.
And that's my report.
All righty, thank you, sir. Committee reports from the council. I see some shaking heads. Councilman Dowden Covey.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a couple here to report. Just wanted to announce that the Pioneer Energy, we did adopt a strategic plan, and I've asked to have copies made available to each council member. So we're excited about that particular endeavor. We also appointed an 11-member Community Programs Advisory Committee. And the purpose of this particular committee is to come forth with programs that might be of interest to our community and what customers want. So we're looking forward to those recommendations that should be coming to us fairly shortly. Also wanted just to report that with regards to the Endurance Capital of the World Committee, we did approve for a second installation of a water bottle filling station. You may recall a year or two ago, we had a young lady make that suggestion at City Council, and that was referred to the Endurance Capital of the World Committee. And we did have one water bottle filling station approved for a location that will be revealed shortly. That's not under our jurisdiction, but we're looking to put our second one in at the bike park. So very excited about that. And I will be reporting about my activities with the Auburn State Recreation area after this. So just those two items.
Thank you. Any other reports? Vice Mayor Morrow.
Yes, thank you. We had a very long meeting with Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, but a lot of things occurred. One of them is that they decided to take a pause on a sales tax measure that they were proposing for 2022. Also, there is, they've adopted the negative declarations, notice of exemptions and airport land use compatibility plans for the Auburn Municipal Airport and the Lincoln airports. And they had public hearings, and a couple of things that came out of that that I think we should be aware of. There has been a lot of individuals who are complaining about the noise. And so they indicated, the commission that I'm on here said we should look into the Truckee, see what they do in Livermore. I looked it up, and they do have some guidelines that I think maybe I'll talk with the city manager about that might be a good thing to help these people who are distressed. And also, since we are extending the runway, that's going to impact them a little more. So, and then there was the sustainability met, and just basically they're working on some projects. Nothing was really, no motions were really made, but they're working forward on some projects. And I'm going to meet with city manager with regard to recology and see what we can do to have people have more of an awareness. So, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be real brief. I had a SACOG board meeting last week. I was appointed the chair of the selection committee for the incoming vice chair, which will be the following year, will be the chair of SACOG. So flattered to do that. Looking forward to that process. I did also attend the League of California Cities annual conference. General Assembly, they had 3 items that were up for vote. It was an eye-opening experience, seeing nearly 400 people yelling votes at yay or nay on items was kind of a surprising way to do things, but that's the way they do it. And then we couldn't tell how many yays or how many nays there were. So then we had to raise our little colored ballots, our little voting cards, and they ran around and collected them. And anyway, it was a very interesting experience. So please, if you want to go next time they have it.
I'll go on next time.
And I believe that's all I've got. So with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Everybody,
Nope, we have one more item.
what did I miss?
Item 12, which is the Auburn State Recreation Area
Oh.
General Plan.
What's it doing down there? Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks.
I give you guys a thumbs up.
Sorry,
We
guys. That
adopted
was on
the-
our consent calendar.
We adopted the consent calendar.
So we'll move ahead on item number 12 here. Alice, you want to go ahead and
Yes, so I am the city's liaison to the Auburn State Recreation Area. And as you very well know, they have been undergoing a massive general plan for the past many years, actually. State Parks has been managing the property that's owned right now by BOR since on and off since 1977. And they haven't had a general plan since, because initially that land was going to be inundated with water. So I think it was around 2012 when they started to undertake the general planning process, which culminated in the release of a proposal in addition to the environmental documentation, which the city did take official action on. We submitted comments during that public comment period in 2019. They since went through all the comments that they've received and made some adjustments. But essentially, what they're doing here is they're taking the entire Auburn State Recreation Area and they're dividing it into a number of these management zones. The management zone that's of most interest to us, of course, is the Auburn Interface Management Zone, which is directly below us across the river from the Placer County Water Agency pumping station. And also the Knickerbocker Management Zone, which is right above it, that goes into Cool. And what they're proposing to do for all of these management zones, many different things, but perhaps the most controversial really is this campsites. They're proposing camping. There is some existing camping that occurs within the Auburn State Recreation Area now. Lake Clementine currently has 15 sites. There are 5 at the Cherokee Bar, Ruckachucky site, and 16 individual camping sites at Mineral Bar. So right now there's about 36 camping sites throughout the entire park system. Initially, they were proposing 260 campsites. Again, that's throughout the Auburn State Recreation Area. For the Auburn Interface, they were initially proposing 50 individual with 0 group. After public comment, they revised that to 25 individual and 3 group, but we don't really know exactly what group constitutes, because it may be that we're actually getting more people out there camping than with 50 individual sites. Clearly, our predominant concern here is with regards to fire, because where there's camping, there are campfires. And so the State Parks Commission is actually charged with approving all general plans for the state park system. Their next meeting is slated for September 29th and 30th, and they will be considering the general plan, the Auburn State Recreation Area General Plan environmental documentation on Thursday, September 30th. Folks can participate in the meeting. You can actually, it's on the screen here, there's live stream, and then you can also register to speak during the meeting to provide your public comments via the link that's above. They are restricting comments to 1 minute. They also accepted written comments, and initially I was hoping to have a letter to have all the council members sign to submit to the State Parks Commission. But when I dug in a little deeper with the agenda, it said that all written comments had to be submitted by September 22nd. Thus, I got with Councilman Berlant as our city appointed liaison to the Greater Auburn Area Fire Safe Council and asked if he would like to co-author a letter to the State Parks Commission expressing our significant concern fire concern with regards to the camping. So we did put forth a letter. We submitted it. Our city manager also drafted a letter. And essentially what we're asking them to do is to amend the general plan to prohibit overnight camping in the Auburn interface management zone during the fire season as defined by CAL FIRE. And instead to make that available for day use only during the fire season. We're also asking that on days that are designated by the Weather Service as red flag warning days, that all campgrounds be closed for use, period. That is very consistent with the action that the county takes with regards to the Hidden Falls Regional Park. They close the entire park on those kinds of days, but because the Auburn State Recreation Area has so many entrance points, it's impossible to close the whole park down. So we're essentially saying, please prohibit camping on those days as well. If they don't wish to take that route, then we are respectfully requesting that pursuant to the guidelines that they've developed in the general plan, that right now says that they would be conducting local fire agencies when they're proposing the actual campgrounds or either new campgrounds or the extension of existing campgrounds. And we're saying essentially that they would be required to obtain local fire agency approval on fire prevention efforts associated with those facilities. So we're taking it a step further. It's not enough just to consult with us. We want to actually be able to approve those fire prevention efforts associated with any kinds of camping that may be there. So again, wanted to encourage folks to tune into that meeting. It's on the agenda for review. They may take the item off the agenda and continue it. I'm not sure. There has been a lot of public comment on this particular item. It was, as Bob had mentioned, it was in the LA Times. So that was quite interesting that they were addressing it there as well. But you know, the risk of wildfire is so significant to us that it's amazing to me when they make statements like, well, if we didn't have camping, then we wouldn't be able to have the mitigation measures in effect to really protect you. They should be doing it anyway, regardless of what they're proposing to do in the park. So in any event, we did submit this letter for the record. And I just want to make sure that I updated council members on that and let you know that we'll be following the Parks Commission hearing, and we'll report back once that happens.
Thank you very much.
Are there any questions?
Any questions from the council? No. Great.
Yeah, if I could just add one item, I subsequent to this had a follow-up meeting with the Bureau of Reclamation, and I won't get onto all the details, but they did provide an update on some of the discussions the chief and even the city manager and I've had with them related to their work that they'll be doing in the canyon below us, which will begin as early as this fall. So we will actually see them do some work here. But the piece that I just wanted to note in this discussion is they pointed out to me in their record of decision, so in their acceptance of the state park general plan, they specifically require the state park, and it says the decision to approve subsequent recreation development projects will be predicated on receiving the necessary input from state and local fire and emergency management agencies. So it was very important to the Bureau to say that the general plan does not just give them approval to go do whatever they want to do. They still have to follow a number of steps. And the most important one, because fire is obviously our focus here, is to ensure that both state and local fire agencies are providing input on any project. So a campground, an extra trail, all of those would require some level of coordination, collaboration. How they follow it, another piece. And just last piece here that I'll just add is the Fire Safe Council also took note on a couple items, and the most important was throughout their responses to us. If you haven't read their response to us, it's worth it, but I'll just read this. It's worth noting that the wildfire risk is an existing condition within the ASRA and is in the surrounding area. The actions of the California State Parks and Reclamation did not create the wildfire risk near developed communities. Rather, urban development has encroached into the naturally fire-prone area surrounding ASRA. And so in what we drafted at the Fire Safe Council, we just reminded them that our community was established over a century ago and that the Bureau did not obtain this land until about 50 years ago or so. And so it's really not fair to say that the city's encroachment of the canyon is the reason we have wildfire risk, and not to at least address the increased activity, whether it's recreation or camping, plays a factor. But that is their response throughout the EIR and EIS documents.
And that is one issue that's a significant concern to me when I read through the documents, is that they truly take that approach. Hey, look, there's already this threat of wildfire. It exists, and we're going to make it the risk less because we're going to actually conduct these activities and so forth. But it's amazing to me, but it's a standard response throughout. I just hope that the state park commissioners will review the public comment, will hear the public comment, understand. We just had a fire in Colfax, where homes burnt. It generated from a campground. And you just can't ignore these kinds of things. The fire risk is so significant here, and I really hope that they hear us and that they will take into consideration our recommendations. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that update. I almost forgot, but we are going to reconvene closed session. So I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
I'll move that we return to closed session.
Second that.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you, everybody. Good evening.
As you start considering the funding.
Oh, thank you.
Committee that's being formed.
Yep.
Oh, my
Current
God.
law allows a special tax proposed by voters to be passed through this.
Wow.
As of the last 3 years, there are now 4 different Court of Appeal cases that say that.
Sorry. Yes, I gave
Court
all the.
Has denied